Given that it's tagged as a romance anime, you might be surprised to learn that Clannad removes the core romantic relationship from the route most of its content is adapted from. And no, I'm not talking about how KyoAni refuses to show anything more explicit than handholding, even as our main characters shack up, get married, and have a kid. I'm referring to the fact Okazaki and Nagisa's romance, which begins halfway through the VN, is totally cut from the anime timeline until the end of the season. This means a narrative originally focused on two characters coming together, forming a couple, and slowly entering into a serious relationship, is now without this central narrative and emotional pillar. So what does the anime replace it with then? Well, content from other characters' routes mostly. Despite this stretch of episodes focusing on Nagisa, we also get whatever this mismatch of content is, as the anime rushes to pull in VN moments from routes that got snubbed full adaptations. But the anime isn't just quantity over quality. As we'll discover, it uses this combination of originally unrelated plot points to craft a uniquely interesting narrative distinct from anything found in the VN. That's not to say every change is an improvement, and preventing our main pair from becoming a couple until right before credits roll is a cliche I wish the anime could have avoided. But seeing how the anime puts a unique spin on the VN's content is the whole reason I started this comparison in the first place. KyoAni is absolutely a studio that should be allowed to cook. So as a reminder, the anime barely started down Nagisa's route before swerving first into Fuko and then Kotomi route. The VN's timeline resets after each of these endings, but in the anime the continuity of course continues, meaning our anime pair has ironically spent a ton more time together by this point than their VN counterparts. While their relationship obviously hasn't been allowed to progress in a concrete way, there is a slow burn aspect to the anime not present in the VN, as it's continued to highlight the characters becoming close and clearly start developing some sort of mutual feelings, even while the focus has been on the side routes. It's also worth noting that the anime pair are allowed to keep the friendships they've been developing across the prior routes, meaning instead of needing to face the upcoming obstacles alone, they have a much livelier group to help, which certainly affects the tone even if it doesn't have a massive impact on the plot. And before we get to the meat of it, I do have to briefly indulge in a trademark tangent to call out the summer uniforms. Being American and having gone to public school, I have no idea how school uniforms work, but it's worth noting that the VN's iconic cream-colored outfits with their turtleneck undershirts, which can't be a real thing, right, are switched out this episode from more normal summer uniforms. I mention this only due to how iconic the jackets are, and because it's effectively the only outfit the VN characters wear. Oddly, despite not even giving its characters portraits with gym clothes, the summer design is present in the VN, but only in a couple blink and you miss it appearances, making it all the more ironic that we see the anime cast in it for the majority of the school episodes. And with that hard-hitting analysis out of the way, I mean, where else would have you learned that tidbit? Let's jump into the route proper. When we last left Nagisa out in the anime, our drama club was stuck on a catch-22. They needed 3 members to form a club, but couldn't attempt any recruitment because they weren't yet an official club. The anime then used this excuse to tangent into first Fuko, then Kotomi route, while in the VN the Fujibayashis provide an immediate solution. Even if they don't want to join, Okazaki and Tsunohara can simply lie about being members, allowing the club to form and them to carry out further recruitment. Having found a solution 10 episodes earlier than their anime counterparts, the VN group heads to the teacher's lounge to ask about an advisor. We reach this moment in the anime via fantastic use of a previously unadapted moment from Kotomi route, where Kyo and Ko volunteer to join the club. Unlike in Kotomi's VN route, where Nagisa, since it's not her route yet, turns him down, anime Nagisa accepts his support, and they are similarly depicted heading to Kimura. And speaking of Kimura, just like in Fuko route, he's a generic shell of himself in the anime. Tsunohara is left behind in the anime, but in the VN, his and Okazaki's casual, even rude tone with Kimura, and the teacher's unfazed response immediately speaks to the backstory and strong relationship the boys have with this old sensei, something the anime never bothers to depict. In either case, Kimura directs him to the choir club, as they'd already asked him to be an advisor. Unlike the VN, the anime crew has already met the choir club during Kotomi's route, making this discussion immediately less confrontational. In the VN, Nishino pragmatically explains the situation, confirming they already asked all of their teachers and Kimura is the only advisor left. In response, V and Suno attempts to pull rank as seniors, something V and Nagisa shuts down, and like in the anime, the drama club leaves to think it over. That evening, Anime Okazaki is lounging in Suno's door when he's roped into taking a call from Suno's sis, an event that occurs the following day in the VN. Your decision in the VN to take this call can start you down Mei's route, but it still appears even if you're locked into Nagisa's route, and determines if Mei shows up later to hang out and cause mischief. Okazaki answers the phone pretending to be her brother in both versions, excitedly inviting her over. Anime Okazaki then attempts to reveal the prank, but Mei hangs up on him, while his VN counterpart shows zero intention of undoing Mei's misunderstanding. We also get some cut follow-up content in the VN as Okazaki discusses what just went down with Tsunohara, who gives his sister's visit some actual context by explaining she's been concerned about him after he was forced out of the soccer club, and is coming by to check if he's found a new purpose at school. But with that setup done, the anime returns to drama club shenanigans with a surprising escalation: blackmail. The VN starts the day with Okazaki and Nagisa walking to school, whereupon Okazaki oversees Nagisa finding the note in her locker, while in the anime Okazaki and Tsunohara are walking together when they spy Nagisa in the yard, who explains she found the note in her desk after PE. Anime Tsunohara immediately yanks the letter, joking it must be a confession, while in the VN Okazaki grabs it after Nagisa becomes both evasive and clearly upset after reading it, before revealing the note to Tsunohara to stop him from teasing him and Nagisa, a decision he immediately regrets. Either way, we can now see it's a threatening blackmail letter, telling them to drop the drama club business. The VN even mentions the characters were written with a ruler to not give away the blackmailer's handwriting. In both versions, Nagisa immediately defends the choir club, despite Tsunohara insisting it's obviously them. The argument becomes much more heated in the VN, with Tsunohara forcing Okazaki to choose if he thinks it was the choir club or not, and Nagisa going so far to backpedal and lie saying she wrote it for herself if Okazaki also accuses them. But regardless of your choices, Tsunohara disappears to investigate. And surprisingly, our dropout goofbag makes a competent detective, as in the VN he soon returns with a name, directly calling the suspect out instead in the anime. This callout skips some intermediary content, including Okazaki harshly pushing Tsunohara away from Nagisa, for fear his harsh methods are too mean for her pure spirit, something Nagisa is having nothing of. She might disagree with Tsuno's methods, but she genuinely appreciates him wanting to help for her sake. In the VN, Nagisa also asks about Tsunohara's background here, and Okazaki explains it, that like Okazaki came to school on a sports scholarship but was soon forced off the team, leaving him purposeless. Although this isn't the first time the VN reveals this info, as it also includes this backstory in Okazaki's monologue the first time he visits Tsuno's dorm. Speaking of, Mei calls after school to stay in the VN, seemingly intentionally placed here so Tsunohara's background is still fresh in the reader's mind. But in either case, it's time for a confrontation. In the VN, our perpetrator isn't called out like in the anime. She approaches the next day of her free will, something that makes her apology much more believable. Also notable is the fact that despite playing a part in both Nagisa and Kotomi route, and even showing up in AfterStory, Nishina and the other choir club girls lack portraits in the VN, meaning their legitimately cute designs are anime original. What isn't, though, is the dynamic between Nishina and this girl who cares a suspicious amount for her, something the anime also ships as evidenced by this AfterStory DVD illustration. In both versions, she explains Nishina was a violin prodigy who after an injury was left unable to play, until Komuro taught Rei about singing and reignited her musical spark. Tsunohara yells that none of this is Nagisa's concern, and with a faint smile she agrees, but now that she knows, she can't stand the choir club's way. The anime never gives Okazaki a clear perspective on this confrontation, but in the VN we see he is in agreement with Tsunohara, noting that he, Suna, and Nagisa also had their dreams blocked due to circumstances outside their control, but unlike the choir club, never used it as an excuse. But VN Okazaki keeps this to himself, soon taking the more extreme approach of throwing his lunch at this girl's feet and running off. In a shockingly tiny improvement, the anime changes this to Suno throwing his juice box at her feet, further emphasizing the girl's resolve as she refuses to react even as her shoes are splattered. And as a side note, despite not yet being credited as episode director until episode 17, you cannot convince me Yamada Naoka wasn't involved in the shot. We get some brief follow-up in the VN as Nagisa and Okazaki tell Komuro of their decision to go up on the drama club, before in both versions they return to the yard. The anime moves Okazaki's explanation of Suno's hatred of clubs here, an efficiency measure the anime has previously used to combine multiple separate conversations into one. Nagisa then turns away from Okazaki, putting on a strong face by saying she had fun working together and is proud to have made it this far, but she's trembling. In the VN, she continues to explain that because she was born with a weak body, she wants to try to live with strength and the conviction to follow her dreams, a fantastically characterizing trait that even returns in AfterStory, which the anime inexcusably removes. But seeing her tremble, Okazuki puts a comforting hand on Nagisa's head, changed to her shoulders for some reason in the anime, which ruins the callback to Okazuki first comforting Nagisa after she learned the theater club was disbanded. And if you're an anime only, you might be surprised to learn that in the VN, this is the choice. You can choose to embrace Nagisa or just stay like this. And if you want to complete Nagisa's ending, Okazuki embraces her and we get a surprisingly well-written confession. Nagisa initially tells Okazuki to stop, that his comfort will only make her cry more, but Okazuki reassures her that it's okay to cry and casually proposes that, needing to find some new fun thing to do at school, wouldn't it be interesting if the next morning they woke up as boyfriend and girlfriend? He follows this up with a proper confession, and despite Nagisa's insecurity that she'll just annoy Okazuki, she accepts. Understandably, this moment changes the entire trajectory of this route. And how does the anime handle it? Well, anime Okazuki's invitation of Kyo into the drama club backfires on him, as she suddenly appears to cockblock the moment, yelling that Tsuno told her the news and asking what the drama club is going to do next. This is an interesting development because we can actually get something similar in the VN. If you choose not to embrace Nagisa, you'll eventually run into a bad ending, but we still get a decent amount of content with her and Okazuki hanging out as friends, still clearly crushing on each other, with a relationship more similar to the anime counterparts. It doesn't diverge for too long. They fail to form the drama club due to some unrelated shenanigans, but it's an interesting scenario I'm surprised the VN even included, given how much unique content is included in this bad ending. So with all this talk of dating in the drama club, our next major plot point is a game of basketball? But how we get there is very different. The anime provides some connecting fabric, and an added sequence where Okazaki and Tsunohara go to the reference room to blow off steam. We'll see our main trio go here occasionally in the anime to relax or have conversations that originally happened elsewhere, which is a great way to keep Yukine around. It's surprisingly appropriate too, given that most of our VN route is just Okazaki and Tsuno chilling with her in the reference room. Speaking of, Yukine now gives an explanation of the ref room similar to what we get in her VN introduction, explaining that it's an overflow location for library books. In the anime, she then introduces a book of spells, something she'll use in both versions to later set up some memorable scenes. This instance, though, is anime only, and she reads Tsunohara's horoscope, which inadvertently inspires his basketball challenge idea, a concept he apparently pulls out of the blue in the VN. It's a seemingly unnecessary addition, but I guess the anime felt it needed something to transition out of the drama club's collapse, and hooking the characters up wasn't an option for its plot progression. But the anime doesn't just throw Okazaki one girl to make up for his missing confession, but two, as Okazaki next runs into Tomoyo being accosted to join the judo club, something set up when she previously juggled Tsunohara. This, of course, is from Tomoyo route, although it occurs early enough on that you can run into it during Nagisa route as well. You're given a choice to help her or not, which our ever-helpful anime protag obviously does, but he takes a different approach in each version, following a Fuko cameo that is. These Fuko cameos are actually from the VN, and are unlocked by playing through a route before Tomoyo's. I think at least. Triggering them seems somewhat inconsistent. Okazaki attempts to intimidate the Judoka in both versions, a somewhat humorous action in the anime given how undeveloped the delinquent aspect of his personality is. When they still won't relent, drags Tomoyo off by the hand in the anime, or orders her away by her first name in the VN, playing the part of the controlling boyfriend. This is an action only anime Okazaki is comfortable with though, as VN Okazaki immediately follows up by telling Tomoyo she should make sure to squash any rumors, a comment she seems confused by. They then walk home together as Tomoyo flirts with Okazaki, laying on even thicker in the VN. The anime Okazaki only has eyes for Nagisa, and reacts to her comments by uniquely mentioning being elected president would make it easier to form the drama club. Oddly, Tomoyo doesn't question why Okazaki is in or cares about the drama club, but comments he is a nice guy after all, a realization she similarly makes in the VN when she learns Okazaki wasn't directly involved in Tsunohara's antics. Our next day begins with Okazaki and Nagisa walking to school in both versions, but this is a clearly much bigger event for our VN characters. We see V and Okazaki about to sleep in before he jumps out of the bed remembering the prior day's events, nervous and excited. V and Nagisa continues to be even less confident than her anime counterpart as she continues to express concern she's not good enough for Okazaki after they meet, but a cute comment mentions that this is the first time in a while she didn't need to bribe herself with a tasty lunch to leave for school. This idiosyncrasy of hers has already disappeared in the anime, but it's an endearing way to show just how excited she is to be at school with her new BF, as well as reminding us of how depressing her school life was pre-Okazaki. This is also the moment where they decide to go by first names in the VN. In the anime, this transition is weirdly more convoluted. It added a scene in Fuko route where she attempted to convince the obviously crushing couple to use first names, which only seems to have stuck for Okazaki. Nagisa doesn't call Okazaki by his first name until the OVA. By contrast, the VN is exactingly strict. The nameplate even waits to switch from Furukawa to Nagisa until the moment she agrees. But whether their commute was romantic or mundane, both pairs are ambushed by Tsunohara at the top of the hill with a basketball, revealing his harebrained scheme to convince the choir club to stop using Nishina's disability as a crutch and give up on Komuro as an advisor by beating the basketball team? Nagisa is surprisingly into it in both versions, but Okazaki definitely isn't, even more so in the VN where he jealously wants to spend time alone with his new girlfriend instead. And it's here we should probably discuss how going out with Nagisa turns V and Okazaki from a mean but generally empathetic helper into a controlling dick who doesn't give a damn about what Nagisa wants and spends the rest of the route lamenting they should just be doing stereotypical couple stuff instead. It's a legitimately odd development, since even though he's colder than his anime counterpart, V and Okazaki appeared to legitimately care for Nagisa as an equal and wanted to help her achieve her dreams. But it's like a switch flips as soon as they start going official and Okazaki decides to start treating her like a 1950s housewife. Not only does this make our point of view character even less sympathetic, but it seems like an odd contrast to his delinquent persona, which you think wouldn't give a damn about doing normie couple stuff, but we might circle back to that dissonance later. Case in point, our jealous boyfriend gives Nagisa zero support in her desire to help Tsunohara's scheme, tells her not to get too close with any other guys, and then when Nagisa is about to explain to Tsunohara she can't help him practice due to this previous promise, Okazaki orders, like no opportunity to talk back, get back in the kitchen, orders Nagisa to shut up and go away, since for some reason Okazaki's embarrassed about Tsunohara discovering their relationship. It's a weird development for a dynamic we're supposed to care about, especially compared to the anime which has no trouble relying on Okazaki's general apathy as an excuse for him avoiding Tsunohara's shenanigans. And also unlike the VN, which is all too eager to shred any sense of respect between Okazaki and Tsunohara, the anime thoughtfully adds Okazaki ruminating on Tsunohara's plan, surprised Tsunohara would actually go out of his way to help someone. This relationship between bros is one that we're supposed to care about, it's central to Mei's route in both versions, and it feels much less hollow in the anime due to the removal of Okazaki's constant bullying and genuine apathy towards his delinquent compatriot. But whether it's wanting to be alone with his date or just wanting to avoid Tsunohara's recruitment attempts, Okazaki flees school the moment class ends, grabbing Nagisa by the hand and running with her down the hill. This is fantastically followed up in the VN as Nagisa, out of breath, comments on how exciting that was, but she left her bag behind, so they need to go back. This results in Okazaki actually being forced into practicing for the game, complete with Nagisa gushing over how cool and athletic her BF looked. In the anime, Nagisa instead reminds Okazaki Tsunohara is looking for him, a scenario V and Okazaki runs into the next day when he again attempts to escape with Nagisa. In either case, Okazaki concocts the perfect excuse, lying that Tsunohara has the hots for him and that the basketball game is just an excuse for Tsunohara to get close to him. V and Okazaki describes Tsunohara's interest much more physically, going so far to add that he's worried because he's trying to save his chastity for Nagisa, a mind-bendingly stupid comment, especially given they've been dating for all of 2 days. We then stop back in the 1950s, as V and Nagisa reveals she's entirely unaware of what homosexuality is, and then proceeds to cancel herself by calling the thought appalling. And if you're about to say, well, it was 2004, the anime, which came out only 3 years later, has Nagisa react in a much more characteristic way, mostly just shocked a new rival has appeared, before making a flustered attempt to convince Okazaki he has to answer Tsunohara honestly. Like with the removal of V and Okazaki's weirdly sudden misogyny, it's an example of how the anime removing problematic elements from the VN is also able to improve its character's consistency. But lie now bot hook and sinker, V and Okazaki convinces Nagisa to go to a nearby restaurant instead. But when Nagisa insists they go home and change out of their uniforms first, a motivation I'm not Japanese or weeby enough to understand, Okazaki not only becomes weirdly controlling trying to force her in, but becomes weirdly horny at the thought of forcing a girl into a restaurant against her will, even if it's not as exciting as forcing her into a bedroom, literally panting like a Looney Tune as he fantasizes. I don't think I have to clarify that this is fucking weird. I'm gonna do my best not to speculate on if this is a Japanese thing, a 2003 thing, or if Junmei is just personally a freak, but I'll again remind you that the anime, which came out in Japan only 3 years later, clearly made an effort to surgically remove all of the VN's confusing, horny, or sexist tangents with extreme prejudice. But V and Okazaki then makes it even worse, as he begins to harass random passing students to vent his frustrations, and tell who should exit the restaurant but Tsunohara. We mercifully skip this weird horny tangent in the anime, with this confrontation instead immediately occurring as Tsunohara catches up to the couple fleeing school. In both versions, Tsunohara ambiguously expresses his desire for Okazaki, to play basketball with him, before Nagisa steps in, saying Tsunohara can't have Okazaki because he's her boyfriend. This teary-eyed defense leaves Tsunohara confused in the end, resulting in all of Okazaki's lies crashing down around him, and ending both his attempt to hide his relationship and to escape basketball practice. But since the anime is still paying lip service to Suno's crush on Nagisa from Fuka route, he simply runs off instead, too heartbroken to recognize the miscommunication. This confession is of course a lie in the anime's continuity, and we get a cute moment as Okazaki admits to Nagisa that hearing it made him happy. But as Tsunohara runs off into the distance, who should arrive but his foreshadowed little sister. We similarly arrive in this situation in the VN after an unadapted strategy meeting where, with Nagisa literally in tears from the realization Okazaki lied, and with both parties now against him, Okazaki begrudgingly allows himself to be roped into the basketball plan. Despite this, Suno's still clearly the third wheel as the couple flirts, before they discuss needing to find a third member due to Nagisa's lacking athleticism, but only Kimura's still around at school. As they walk home, Tsunohara much less dramatically runs off to go to the arcade, before Tsunohara Mei similarly makes her dramatic appearance. Mei's arrival is interesting in a couple dimensions. She visits only once in the VN, assuming you choose to answer the phone for Tsunohara that is, but the nature of her visit changes depending on which route you're on. In the anime, she instead stops by a number of times, so it can adapt all of her possible interactions concurrently. Oddly, she inexplicably doesn't appear in the VN if Okazaki and Nagisa aren't dating. I assume because the VN didn't want to add even more bespoke content to what's technically a bad ending. We then get an extended intro to Mei in the VN, with her asking directions to the dorm and some back and forth before they finally realize she's Suno's sister, while the next anime episode begins with them already introduced off screen. V and Okazaki also takes the joke of Suno's sister being a monster a little too far, and straight up screeches in her face in an attempt to communicate, something Mei generously plays off by commenting to Nagisa that her boyfriend is funny. You're then given the choice to follow Mei into Tsunohara's dorm, like in the anime, or ditch her here, which largely removes her involvement from later in the route. The prior choice also provides a cute VN-only interaction where Mise receives a double shock upon learning that Suno had such a nice sister, and that Okazaki managed to find himself a girlfriend. Mei then ropes him into helping clean Suno's messy room in both versions, while the VN continues the tired trend of Okazaki being extremely cruel towards Tsunohara, refusing to say even a single nice thing about him to Mei, leading to Nagisa's increasing frustration. This back and forth ends when Okazaki tricks Nagisa into saying something mean about Tsunohara, which Mei of course overhears, which the anime replaces with Mei overhearing Nagisa whispering if they should tell her about Tsunohara's unrequited crush on Okazaki. In either case, Mei is shocked by the revelation, and apologizes for her brother's behavior. Nagisa proves herself as Suno's sole defender in both versions, and Mei ends up surprisingly consoled upon hearing about her brother's obsession with the planned basketball challenge. This reaction makes a little more sense in the VN, which is already set up that the purpose of her visit was to confirm if her brother found a new purpose after being kicked off the soccer team, something his admittedly weird passion for the basketball game counts as. Ultimately, this level of concern for her big bro leads our two only children both deciding they want a little sis like Mei, which leads V and Mei into interrogating Nagisa about her relationship, using the excuse of gossiping about it later to secure an invitation to stay with her overnight. The anime sets this up slightly later, with the addition of Mise seeing them off from the dorm, thanking Nagisa for letting Mei stay with her since a high school boys' dorm is no place for a young girl. But first we have Suno enthusiastically returning to the dorm in both versions, tricked in the VN by a lie that one of Nagisa's friends looking for a boyfriend is here, changed to a technically true statement in the anime as Okazaki mentions cute girl that likes him is here to visit. V and Suno surprised to see Mei already satisfied with her visit's purpose, while in the anime this is where Okazaki's lie is revealed. Nagisa doesn't quite cry in this version, but anime Suno does correctly point out that Okazaki is the root of all their troubles. Either way, we get a repeat of Fuko route as Okazaki and Nagisa go with Mei to ask her parents if she can stay over. Mei is a smarter guest than Fuko and tactically butters Aki up with compliments, leading to him declaring himself the handsomest. In an endearingly saccharine moment, V and Nagisa immediately objects, transparently presenting Okazaki as an even more manly example, resulting in the anime instead adds a scene where Okazaki and Mei eat with the family, and Nagisa explains the basketball plan to Mei. She's into it and plans to stay and watch, which is what finally convinces the anime Okazaki he can't get away with it anymore. Humorously, the anime also adds Mei explaining she's on an exam break when Nagisa's parents ask why she can stay so long, while in the VN, it's clear she's skipping for her bro. And speaking of, the next day is the first day off V and Okazaki and Nagisa have had since they started dating. Okazaki's psyched for a date, but with Mei here, it's not quite going to work out. The specifics aren't super consequential, and since the anime moves this content to its post-season OVA, once the anime pair is finally dating as well, I'll cover it later. The next morning, the anime pulls in some more early route Tomoyo content, as like in the VN, Okazaki runs into her on the hill on the way to school. She's staring at the sakura trees, and you have the choice to call out to her. If you do, like in the anime, she pulls him along by the hand and runs up the hill upon realizing they'll be late to class, something the anime punctuates with the addition of Kyo scoffing another rival has appeared. But after all these distractions, we finally rejoin the main plot, finding a strategy to win the basketball game. They decided earlier in the VN Nagisa wasn't going to cut it, a decision Suno similarly makes in the anime upon learning his sister is going to be watching. This is one of the mini-games in the VN, and you can recruit a huge swath of characters to help depending on your choices, including Misai, Fuko, Yoshino, and even Akio himself. These characters are bucketed into two groups, those you can win with and those who will inevitably lose you the game and lock you out of Nagisa's ending. It's fun to play around and see the unique shenanigans each character gets up to, but it's pretty clear from the start who's going to fit into each bucket, and the anime goes with the choice many players probably gravitated towards, the exceedingly athletic Kyo. It's a choice that makes even more sense in the anime, given she's a drama club member, but in both versions she agrees to the scheme surprisingly quickly, in part so she can officially treat Suno as the team underling. But she also gets something out of Okazaki in the anime, forcing him to join her and Ro for lunch. The anime also has a scene showing the choir club agreeing to watch, a funny change since the VN suggests that despite Suno's insistence, they totally skipped the game and ignored the entire scheme. Third member secured, we get a May orchestrated date between Okazaki and Nagisa and the VN, which is mentioned in the anime covers in the OVA. The VN also adds an interesting introduction of Ibuki as she wanders into the bakery and Nagisa explains Fuko's situation. It's a moment obviously not needed at this point in the anime, but its inclusion is an odd addition to the VN as well. Perhaps it is intended to get players interested in Fuko route in case they missed it this go around? We also see May return to her hometown here in the VN, meaning unlike the anime, she misses out on the big game. And it's appropriate that we're speaking about all these other characters, as before we get into the game, the anime first pulls out a quick collection of content from other routes. We begin with Tomoyo route as she enters the boys' classroom to eat lunch with them. This also occurs in the VN as she warms up to Okazaki, following a cut midday excursion to Suno's dorm after Tomoyo insists he can't be allowed to skip school. In either case, the surrounding students gossip about whose girlfriend she is, leading to Tomoyo loudly declaring she isn't Tsunohara's girl, but she's fine if they assume she's with Okazaki. In the anime, she gives the excuse that she's stopping by due to the two boys' constant tardiness, when in the VN it's transparently just because she wants to hang out with Okazaki. Kyo then storms into the classroom to interrupt in the anime, something that happens later in Tomoyo route as well, in part due to her jealousy trying to sabotage their relationship, and in part due to Tomoyo legitimately riling the boys up and making a scene. This leads to a humorous use of the VN's visual style as Kyo puppeteers Ryo to chastise them, given Ryo, not Kyo, is technically the class prez, while in the anime she kidnaps Okazaki due to his previous promise to eat lunch with her. We also set up some of the anime-only harem elements that are about to appear, as Tomoyo makes Okazaki admit he isn't currently seeing anyone, meaning Kyo can't criticize her hanging out with him. We then get a short interlude of Okazaki eating in the cafeteria with the sisters, Kyo calling back to the prior routes by claiming he always eats lunch with Nagisa or Kotomi now, complete with a shot of the two girls now sadly eating in the drama club alone. Not to let my criticism of that route seep in, but it's weird how suddenly anime Okazaki drops Kotomi after her route ends, as he never eats lunch alone with her again, despite willingly ditching Nagisa to do so before. But the anime also starts to show its hand here, revealing how it's going to handle these added harem elements, as Okazaki seems to genuinely notice and understand Ro's embarrassment around him, and looks sad he's unable to reciprocate, no hint of him becoming flustered or conflicted. The anime then continues its added content with something I would have never expected. It takes a moment to actually increase the thematic content of the upcoming game. We see Okazaki alone in the yard, directly calling back to the tragic basketball sesh Nagisa invited him to, and he again makes a futile attempt at a basket. It's a clear reminder of his injury and calls back to the pain he faced last time he held a ball, an incident the VN weirdly doesn't reference throughout this entire basketball mini-arc. It's ironic since in the VN this incident occurred not that long ago, but it's only the anime that remembers it, even though in that version it occurred 14 episodes and 2 entire side arcs back. We then get an odd inclusion in the anime, as it adapts a gag where Tsunohara is sad in the dorms due to Mei ignoring him, becoming secretly excited when she visits, only for it to be revealed she's here for Okazaki. In the VN this transitions into the previously mentioned date arc, while here in the anime she just invites Okazaki to dinner with the Furukawas. It's an odd moment for the anime to keep, both because it goes nowhere and because the anime reuses this exact same setup in the OVA when it's adapting the cut date content. But enough messing around, it's game day. The anime cuts some prelude of Nagisa bringing a celebration bento for lunch, as well as Okazaki and Suno being weirdos as they waddle through the hall due to overpractice. Instead, the anime cuts to their encounter with Kyo, even more angry than normal due to being dissed by the basketball team. She asks how to injure the opponents without getting a foul, and again highlighting his personality differences, VN Okazaki enthusiastically goes along, explaining how to best get away with it. The VN also adds an odd focus on the power of friendship here, with Nagisa gushing before the game that if they win it means their bonds of friendship are stronger or something. The anime smartly pivots to instead focus on Okazaki's injury and the psychological pain he's come to associate with basketball. This is a much more effective and relevant way to frame the game, as an odd development given the anime's trend of normally cutting out thematic and character development. Continuing its hot streak, the anime also helps tie Okazaki to the club itself, adding the basketball club president admitting he accepted the match because he wanted to face Okazaki. I'm not sure when Okazaki canonically left the team, but it's a nice bit of continuity to show he's recognized by some of the members and vice versa. And speaking of additions, we also get the much more superficial inclusion of every possible side character here to watch the match, including actually confirming the choir girls are watching. The game begins, and in the VN Kyo exclusively dominates, with Suno being entirely useless. The anime instead allows all three characters to show off, letting Tsunohara's athleticism shine as they work together to score points. They begin to gain a lead, but the basketball club switches in their seniors. They're appropriately outmatched, attempting to cling onto their lead with Suno completely gassed in both versions. With the clock clicking down, the drama club finds itself down by a single point, forced to concoct a plan to score a final shot. It's in this discussion in the VN where you have to choose if Okazaki will take the final shot, or if he'll leave it to the recruited party member. Having Okazaki take the last shot results in a win, while relying on your team member will eventually lead to a loss, leading to the bad ending and or Kimura route. It's an odd choice, as while the VN mentions Okazaki going for the basket would be a sneak attack given he's been avoiding it all game, it never gives a clear explanation for how he's supposed to make the shot. I mean, if there's one thing we know about Okazaki's basketball career, it's that it was cut short due to his inability to shoot. The anime avoids this by instead having Okazaki end up with the ball at the last possible moment, before being knocked clean backwards. Unlike the VM, which continues to depict this match as a purely athletic one, the themes the anime set up earlier begin to sink in as Okazaki's pessimism returns. He thinks back to Nagisa's defeated face in the rain and wonders why he's trying so hard if his efforts just bring about more pain, and accepts his inability to change fate. It's a motivation that would arguably work better in the VN. Anime Okazaki just went through the same arc in Katomi's route, for goodness sake. But it's an inclusion that elevates the moment so much, since when Nagisa calls out to shoot, it's not just his girlfriend encouraging him, but a reminder of why he's working so hard. The anime even brings back its desaturated visuals from Okazaki's first meeting with Nagisa, with the entire gym painted a dull color except her, mirroring how her voice is solely the only thing he can hear. He throws the ball, scoring an inelegant buzzer beater in both versions, with the anime even mechanically justifying the shot due to Okazaki being knocked clean backwards, meaning he didn't have to raise his arms the entire way to shoot. The drama club erupts in celebration, with the anime showing Nagisa clearly admiring and the choir girls actually impressed. But the moment is broken when the basketball club's advisor runs in to break up this unsanctioned match. They escape without issue in the anime, but in the VN this is another significant moment for their relationship as Nagisa trips and twists her ankle during the escape, spilling her carefully prepared bento over the floor. No longer able to make a smooth exit, Okazaki tries to help her, but the other students and even the teachers try to intervene, telling Nagisa to get away from a delinquent like him. Okazaki wonders if Nagisa, meek as she is, will go along with the teacher's request, but she stands up for him and refuses to leave his side, resulting in Okazaki publicly declaring she's his girlfriend as they limp off. Surprisingly, we actually get a somewhat adapted version of this moment later on in the anime. We'll discuss that later when it happens. Instead, the anime has our main trio see May off, appropriately promising to return, before the group heads to an off-screen party set up by Kyo. The VN instead has an on-screen but much humbler party, as the recruited helper always skips out, sparing them from having to write a dozen different versions of this conversation as well. We get Nagisa chiding Sunahara for drinking juice, which leads to him finally learning that she was held back and thus is his senior. This conversation establishes two important things. Sunahara now finally understands Nagisa was held back like him and Okazaki, and critically, we learn from Nagisa that Akio sometimes catches Boten by baiting him with Sane's bread. We get some additional follow-up on the game the next day in the VN, as Nagisa gushes over how cool her BF looked and some more power of friendship nonsense, while Sunahara actually gets some, albeit undeserved, respect as rumors spread about their victory. At lunch, Nagisa suddenly realizes it's the date of the info session, and they head to the club room in case any potential recruits show up, but find the choir girls waiting instead, which is where we pick up in the anime. The anime again has the girls mention they were inspired by the match, while the VN doubles down on the opposite, with the girls never acknowledging the match and Okazaki even lampshading that it didn't matter. This is actually confirmed in Fuko route, since despite the lack of any basketball match, the girls still appear on the info session date and make the same offer. In fact, the only reason the club isn't able to reform if you lose the game is because they're discouraged and don't visit the club room, assumedly leaving the selfless choir girls hanging. But either way, Nishina proposes sharing Kimura as an advisor on alternating days, allowing the formation of both clubs. Via Nagisa still feels guilty and is about to admit Sunahara and Okazaki are lying about their club involvement when Sunahara gets a rare VNW as he steps forward to declare himself a true club member, as long as he doesn't have to do any acting. There's an added complication in the anime, as we suddenly cut to Nagisa declaring it didn't work, and explaining the student council wouldn't allow it due to no existing precedent. Instead of moving on to focus on putting on a play like in the VN, we're about to dip back into other routes content, as anime Nagisa conveniently falls sick. This leads us down whatever this mess of content is, in an anime-only route that adapts and remixes moments from Tomoyo, Kyo, and Yukine route, but with its own purpose. In some ways, this is the most harem-y the anime ever gets, but as we'll see, it's also a compilation of Okazaki realizing he's flatly uninterested in any girls besides Nagisa, something that must have bodied any anime-onlys who are expecting more ambiguity in the pairing options. Nagisa falling ill is also an interesting narrative development. It's used here as a plot point to get her out of the way, but it does detract from her sickness's supernatural undertones present in the VN, where her bouts of sickness always cling to her for months and seem inextricably tied to the seasons. We next see the anime club dropping Nagisa off at the Furukawas and explain for the audience she won't be able to return to school for a while. Akio also thanks Okazaki for helping Nagisa out again, calling back to when she fainted after waiting for him in the rain. We see anime Okazaki react with guilt to this thanks, a reaction the VN also highlighted when he helped Nagisa home before. Sensing weakness, anime Tomoyo recognizes this as her chance, and the very next morning breaks into Okazaki's house to wake him up, an occurrence that of course is taken from her route. The anime also adds Tomoyo mention Okazaki's dad let her in, to which his expression darkens. This interaction crops up later in the VN as well, but only once we see the three meet in person. Fellow students stare as anime Tomoyo leads Okazaki by hand to school, somewhat referencing the VN rumors around them going out. In a desperate bid to share the misery, Okazaki convinces her Sunahara needs help waking up on time as well, an excuse he concocts a second time Tomoyo escorts him to school in the VN. The conversation in Sunahara's room is shortened in the anime, but in a god-tier continuity detail, Tomoyo's VN comment about his room being messy is changed to complimenting it for being so tidy, since of course in this timeline May just visited and cleaned things up. It's also during VN Tomoyo's first time dragging Okazaki to school that she explains her motivation for being elected, wanting to save the Sakura trees, which we learn later in the anime. She then drops him off for class, but anime Okazaki has no time to rest, as Kyo recruits him for a picnic lunch and tries to push Okazaki and Ryo together. This setup is of course taken from her route, but actually occurs after Ryo and Okazaki start dating. Don't ask why he's going out with Ryo if it's called Kyo route, making her pushing the couple together feel more appropriate in the VN, although her VN only attempts to make Ryo feed Okazaki certainly aren't. Given Kyo's route involves Okazaki and Ryo dating from basically the start, the anime adapts only bits and pieces of it, so I'll give a quick summary here. Basically, Kyo escalates her attempts to pair the two up, tricking them into eating lunch together, then walking home together, which leads them hanging out at the arcade, before she forces Ryo to confess to Okazaki. You can choose to have Okazaki begrudgingly accept, which leads to them regularly eating lunch together, plus Kyo third wheeling. And that's more or less where we are in the anime, although it again blows me away by taking the initiative to introduce a theme unique to its version. In this case, it introduces the idea of Okazaki's uncertainty about the future. Kyo and Ryo get additional dialogue discussing their plans after graduation, becoming a school teacher and a nurse respectively, which serves to highlight how Okazaki still has no clue what he wants to do with himself after graduation. It ties into Okazaki's romantic uncertainty in this version, realizing he needs to drop the ambiguity and shoot his shot with Nagisa, and even resurfaces as we get closer to graduation. We also get some less impactful setup added in the anime, this time for Tomoyo's upcoming election attempt, as the student campaigns in the background of the trio's picnic. But despite the gaggle of girls now descending on him, the anime uses a very anti-harem presentation, as Kyo is clearly the only one into this forced romance in the anime. Okazaki's even less into Ryo's advances than in the VN, and Ryo herself mostly seems to feel guilty in this version. Kyo insists to her Okazaki's technically not going out with anyone, but we all, Ryo included, know him and Nagisa are all but official. And speaking of, the anime then adds Tsunohara similarly interrogating Okazaki as to why he's not going out with anyone as they walk home, when Tomoyo again smells an opportunity and also pops a question on Okazaki. Anime Okazaki's excuse pulls on a couple different threads here. He mentions he's a delinquent, the same excuse he gives Kyo in the VN, and dismissively mentions his family situation. Tomoyo's confused, mentioning his dad seemed normal to her, an exchange that similarly happens later on in the VN. This conversation is unique to the anime, but Tomoyo also has her tagging along with Okazaki and Tsunohara, leading to Tsuno in both versions concocting a plan to turn the situation to his benefit, leading the infamous Tomoyo into a neighborhood of punks that bully him. The thugs are scared off by Tomoyo's presence, but she's clearly uncomfortable, leading to Okazaki intervening. In the anime, he lies that Tsuno wanted to treat Tomoyo at a local tea shop, while in the VN he forces Tsunohara to come up with that lie, or risk him revealing the truth. In either case, Tomoyo admits to Okazaki she knew he intervened for her sake as soon as Tsuno leaves, then mentions that spending time with him is much more fun than with her normal friends, a comment she unsubtly clarifies to spending time with Okazaki is more fun, a line anti-harem god anime Okazaki simply does not react to. It's refreshing how decisive anime Okazaki is here, despite everyone coming on pretty damn hard the moment Nagisa is out of the picture, something we further understand as we see his gaze rest on the bakery sign as he passes at night. Unfortunately for Tomoyo, he clearly doesn't agree with her comment. There's someone else he has much more fun spending time with. Tomoyo continues to wake Okazaki up in both versions, including an interlude of Tsuno being punished for being a perv. We then transition to the second picnic meeting from Kyo's route in the anime, this time Ryo cooked, an unfortunate development that straight up kills Botan. We also get a subtle addition of Kyo reacting with melancholy when Okazaki and Ryo finally manage to have a friendly interaction as they return to class. It's a characterizing moment not possible in the VN, given it's locked into Okazaki's point of view, and shows her internal conflict of enthusiastically pushing the two together for the sake of her sister, but being secretly disappointed when it actually works. But anime Okazaki isn't concerned about either girl, and he spends his time alone in the clubroom. This entire stretch of episodes goes to great effort to frame Okazaki as isolated, even when he is surrounded with friends, showing how much Nagisa has become an inseparable part of his life. Alone and thinking of her, he adds Nagisa as the person on duty on the board. He apparently also adds this in the VN, given its reference in the route's conclusion, but for the life of me I can't find where he did it. Either way, it certainly doesn't have the emotional weight this gesture does in the anime. But Okazaki can't spend all his time alone and depressed. We have more girls this route to cover. This time it's Yukine. Like with Kyo, only bits and pieces of Yukine route are adapted in the anime, but unlike Kyo, she gets a proper arc during the next season. But there's also a lot less juicy content to adapt from her route, given most of it revolves around Tsunohara and Okazaki hanging out with her in the ref room, arguing who she likes between them. In the anime, however, Yukine is a legit bro. Unlike the other girls, she doesn't seem to be interested in Okazaki. When he visits to kill time, she notices he's upset and introduces a magic spell to distract him. This spell is to invoke the evergreen situation of trapping him in a supply closet with whomever he thinks of when the spell is cast. In the VN, it's Tsuno who's initially interested in the magic spells, and by this point in Yukine route, we've already seen a couple incantations. In fact, he point-blank asks Yukine if a spell exists to create the above situation, with Okazaki blown away when she confirms one does indeed exist. Tsuno tries and fails to stack the 3 required coins in the VN before letting Okazaki try, something he accomplishes in the anime out of boredom, still unaware of the spell's effect. He then repeats the chant, which in the VN is inexplicably Speedy Keanu Reeves, before learning he has to picture someone to be trapped in the closet with. Like with the basketball recruitment, this is a full-on minigame in the VN, with multiple possible outcomes depending on your choices. Some are appropriately spicy, and some are just dumb, such as being stuck with Tsuno because he interrupts Okazaki's train of thought. The most ridiculous option, however, is Akio, who Okazaki hasn't yet met in this route, and who is super into a permadeath paintball match to the extent he convinces Okazaki he's a hitman who can't risk visiting his family anymore, leading to Okazaki tearfully expressing his sympathies to Nagisa after being let out. In the anime, however, his first thought turns to, of course, Nagisa, before drifting to Kyo, just as the coin falls and the spell completes. But before we conclude this sequence, the anime adds on Okazaki discussing his worries with Yukine, asking her about the student council. She mentions the upcoming election, leading to Okazaki finding Tomoyo's recruitment posters and hatching a scheme to get her elected. A funny development given this means Yukine is responsible for inspiring both the basketball game and Okazaki's election assistance in the anime. It's now time for our spell to pay off, as in both versions Kyo, assuming you picked her when casting the spell in the VN, appears to rope Okazaki into helping her put away gym equipment. She's wearing her normal outfit in the VN, while in the anime she's decked out in the not-quite underwear gym uniform you see in anime. I would Google to check if this is an actual uniform Japanese schools enforce or just anime kumarism, but I do not want that in my search history. It's an odd change for the otherwise chaste anime, but I'm fully convinced the VN would have done the same if it had more than 2 models for any given character. She even plays the basketball game in her normal school outfit in the VN, which in retrospect is probably not recommended given the skirt situation. Either way, the two are inevitably trapped, an act executed by Fuko's friend KyoAni in the anime. Okazaki immediately apologizes, while in the VN he humorously apologizes before the door even closes, having accepted the mechanisms of fate, which in both versions result in Kyo becoming suspicious, thinking he planned it, and becoming hot and bothered. Okazaki explains the spell and attempts to defuse the situation by saying he thought of her because he figured she wouldn't mind, but the idea he chose her over anyone else only turns Kyo on more. In the anime, Kyo reacts to this by bringing up what she's been doing with Ro, and Okazaki admits he basically gets what's going on. Weirdly, despite not being committed at this point in the VN, Okazaki is not into it in either version, even after realizing Kyo really does like him due to some shenanigans with the prior spell in the VN, as the situation only gets awkwarder as time ticks on and Kyo gets more assertive, not helped by the anime's creative camera angles, which are complete with plenty of Yamada Naoko leg shots. But relief comes as Okazaki flashes back to Yukine's explanation of how to break the spell, which involves the legitimately dangerous step of removing his pants in the VN, changed to the less provocative requirement to remove his shirt in the anime. In either case, Kyo absolutely gets the wrong idea as Okazaki starts to strip, and he's barely able to hide as the door slides open and the spell is broken. Kyo blows off the situation either way, with Yukine even making the comment in the VN that love spurred by dangerous situations doesn't last long. But despite escaping the supply closet, anime Okazaki can't get away, as Tomoyo appears to walk home with him the second Kyo leaves. As they walk home, Okazaki asks about Tomoyo's election campaign, now convinced she can help the drama club finally be allowed to form. Interestingly, his motivation here is opposite to in Tomoyo's VN route, where he likes Tomoyo but is convinced she won't hang out with delinquents like him if elected, so on some level he doesn't want her to win. But upon reaching the school gate, they're beset by a gang from a rival school, who've launched a retaliatory strike after Tomoyo was seen walking through their neighborhood. In the VN, Okazaki instead spots the hooligans from inside the school building, and lures them to the courtyard to lessen the number of witnesses. The anime then adapts another unlockable Fuko appearance, who shows up to defuse the conflict. It doesn't work. The fight plays out similarly in both versions, with Sunahara attempting to make a cool arrival, only for Tomoyo to insult and attack him on instinct, her cruelty towards her own ally helping break the rival gang's morale. The attackers are defeated, but a teacher appears to interrogate the trio on what happened, and Okazaki knows Tomoyo's election attempt is on the line. This scene plays out more naturally in the anime, where the teacher immediately zeroes in on Okazaki, the known delinquent, which Okazaki uses to his advantage, taking all the blame and deflecting it from Tomoyo, picking up a suspension in the process. By contrast, the VN concludes this confrontation in a weirder and less consequential fashion. The teacher oddly doesn't make any assumptions and just asks him what's going on. As Okazaki attempts to think up an excuse, he sees Nagisa walking by, who he's only sparsely interacted with on this route, which inspires him to lie that this was all just a drama club production, something the teacher randomly buys. But it's even weirder on a gameplay level. For this scene to work, you have to have talked to Nagisa enough to learn about the drama club, but not enough to get locked into her route. It's an odd decision that will force you to reach for a guide, especially since unlike Kotomi route, Nagisa basically never shows up again in Tomoyo route. So if the school brawl is brushed away so easily, how is VN Okazaki suspended? Well, let's just say it's significantly less altruistic. VN Tomoyo route continues with some slice of life, Okazaki noticing graffiti all over Tomoyo's election posters, before he tries to convince Tomoyo to give up on her campaign by making out with her in the hallway. They start going out, and Okazaki, conflicted about wanting to see his girlfriend succeed, but not wanting to let her become part of the school administration he hates so much, lets out his frustration not by talking to Tomoyo, but by getting hot and heavy with her in an empty classroom. It looks like he's about to go for a home run when a teacher interrupts, who Okazaki jumps in a half-intimidation technique, half-attempt to avoid Tomoyo being blamed. It's metatextually fascinating and more than a little gross, so the VN's most sexually explicit scenes, ignoring pervy gags like the supply closet which are clearly intended to be comedic, occur not when Okazaki is attracted to someone, but when he's conflicted and focused inward. It's a scenario we also see occur in Kyo route and AfterStory, and we'll later see that when VN Okazaki gets some alone time with Nagisa at the end of her route, his lust isn't focused on her or even her body, but he instead gets off on the ownership he has over her and how to make Nagisa's other classmates jealous. It's a discomforting trend, especially as the VN seems to largely present this mindset uncritically, as normal, but it's also a darkly interesting character trait. Despite the VN's many cliché pervy jokes, when it gets serious, VN Okazaki's exclusive interest in sex seems to be as a way to soothe his ego and internal conflict, without any concern or even attraction towards his present partner. Maybe that's part of the reason why the anime chose to just cut off physicality. And this is what gets VN Okazaki suspended, and would have gotten him expelled if Tomoyo didn't contradict Okazaki when he claimed he was non-consensually assaulting her. You think she would have been suspended too in that case, but I don't want to get deep enough into the VN's gender politics to dissect why it doesn't even treat that as a possibility. It's also the second time Okazaki can nearly avoid expulsion for attempted rape in the VN. If Nagisa is trapped with Okazaki in the supply closet, they're pressed against each other and he's caught with his pants down, literally, when he breaks a curse. It's strange it happens twice, given rape accusations are a little heavy for my all-ages slice of life VN. Anyways, this whole affair makes Okazaki's VN suspension a little less admirable than in the anime, although it's also interesting anime Tomoyo is willing to go along with Okazaki's lie, with him reassuring her it's okay because the election benefits him too. But whatever the cause, Tomoyo continues to wake Okazaki up during his suspension, in both versions waking him even earlier so they can spend some time together, as well as fulfilling the natural instinct of any female Clannad character in cooking him breakfast. Vivian should admit she does because she knows Okazaki's household has no mom, no feminine presence, before in both versions she invites his dad to eat with him as well. This leads to Okazaki immediately running out without explanation, a bigger deal in the VN due to the intimate mood that had been building between the two. Okazaki retreats to Tsunohara's dorm and pranks him in both versions. Anime Okazaki has escaped Tomoyo for now, but in the VN she returns after school and mentions his dad seemed normal, a comment she made earlier in the anime, but follows it up in the VN by affirming his feelings and saying of course she can't understand his pain after only a single meeting. Despite this depressing turn, Okazaki seems generally happier in Tomoyo out, given he gets to spend his suspension hanging out with his girlfriend, something his anime counterpart is missing out on, as he continues to be depressed without Nagisa. Speaking of, the anime next flashes to the remains of the drama club, Kyo commenting there's nothing to do now that both their club prez and harem protagonist are MIA. Ro wonders if the suspension will hurt Okazaki's chance of graduating and getting into college, again bringing up the anime-exclusive theme of an uncertain future. There's a knock at Okazaki's door in the anime. He's excited, but it's not Nagisa or even Tomoyo, it's Kyo and Ryo. Okazaki's visible disappointment so noticeable Kyo even calls him out on it. The twins take him on a group date, something also taken from Kyo-Ryo after Okazaki is dating Ryo, and arrive at a horoscope machine, which Okazaki is oddly into. Ryo and Okazaki use this machine twice in Kyo-Ryo, once before their dating and once afterwards, but Kyo isn't present in either case, well, unless you count stalking the pair from afar as being present. But the anime isn't looking to just reference this moment, it uses it as a way for Okazaki to cleanly reject Ryo, selecting friend without hesitation when the machine asks for his relationship with her. Again, the anime never says it outright, but the way Okazaki acts, it seems like he's intentionally doing this as a hint to Ryo, not just out of ignorance towards her crush. The fortune they get is totally different between versions, with V and Ryo revealing an entire binder she keeps her fortunes in, while in the anime the two at least get to enjoy a peaceful walk home. Ryo gets a nice speech where she admits she knows her fortunes are often wrong, but takes solace in that because it means the future isn't set in stone. Given how characterizing this explanation is, I'm sure it has to be from the VN somewhere, but I couldn't find a source after a cursory search, so I'll instead distract you with this cool real-world building the anime uses as a background. We're one hopeless crush down, one to go, as the anime resumes with Tomoyo making breakfast for Okazaki the next morning. She again asks about his dad, though Okazaki wordlessly shuts her down with a cold stare until she apologizes, Kabaru style. Like in the VN, Okazaki asks Tomoyo how the campaign's going, and while she says it's going well, we can clearly see she's hiding something. We then get the climax of the anime's harem content, and one of its admittedly funny but least compelling added sequences, as one by one the girls arrive with food to celebrate the end of Okazaki's suspension. They sit around the packed table, all knowing it's too much food to eat, but each wanting Okazaki to try their cooking. Even Fuko appears with starfish-shaped treats. Okazaki attempts to mediate, but they turn on him, criticizing him for being too vague, which isn't really a fair complaint. Given how cold he's been towards them, it should be pretty obvious what his intentions are. But with that out of the way, we get Okazaki's triumphant return to school, immediately finding Tomoyo in trouble in both versions. Her posters are scrawled with gang member, and rumors swirl about her being involved in a fight, worse in the VN due to the added stigma of her dating a delinquent. In both cases, Okazaki quickly devises a plan, and secures Suna's support by buttering up with compliments. In another sports twist, he approaches the baseball team, and challenges them to a game versus Tomoyo. Tomoyo's confused in both versions, but goes along remarkably easily in the anime. In the VN, she also eventually agrees to the game, but only due to the trust she has in her boyfriend and the relationship they've built up to this point. They decide to play to either the first run or 3 outs, and while Tomoyo throws hard, her aim leaves something to be desired, not helped as she gets genuinely upset in the VN by Tsunohara's constant banter. She pauses the game to confront Okazaki, in the VN asking him to pitch instead, and after he explains his arm injury, asking him to catch for her then. You have a choice to agree or not, but if you go along with her suggestion, Okazaki's fears are confirmed as Tomoyo holds back and the match is lost. To win, you have to do as anime Okazaki does, realizing he just has to tell her to aim at Tsunohara's face. The batters are quickly struck out, anime Tsunohara's censored face a nice callback to an earlier Easter egg from the VN. With their victory, Tomoyo finally realizes the stunt's purpose. Rumors about her being a delinquent begin to be replaced with ones about how she single-handedly took down the baseball team. V and Tomoyo says it feels like lying, but Okazaki assures her they're just giving the school something more interesting to gossip about. In retrospect, it's funny how much this mirrors Tsunohara's basketball plan and Nagisa route. 2 routes involve laymen beating sports teams to gather public support as a major plot point, and to his credit, anime Okazaki even calls out Tsunohara for the inspiration. As they walk home in the anime, Okazaki finally asks Tomoyo why she wants to be president, why she wants to save the sakura trees, leading into a conversation the VN placed on the last day of Okazaki's suspension. Tomoyo explains that her family had lived emotionally separate from each other, with only her little brother making an effort to maintain family ties. Finally, her parents decided on an amicable divorce, but her brother wouldn't agree to go with either of them and straight up throws himself in front of a car, changed to the slightly less dramatic act of throwing himself into a raging river in the anime. This isn't framed as a tragic moment, it's relationship advice, as their family finally bonded around him in the hospital and they now live as a happy family. This is maybe the worst the VN gets with its saccharine reverence for family, and the first occurrence that supports my crack theory that the VN's themes about the importance of family might just have a dark underbelly. I mean, how else do you interpret this besides the VN saying that a family splitting up, even for valid reasons, is unacceptable, and that nearly killing yourself just so everyone has something to trauma bond over is the preferable outcome? This isn't even subtext, it's literally the text of Tomoyo's story. But the rabbit hole goes deeper, because it's also where the anime makes a subtle, almost unnoticeable addition, with Tomoyo mentioning a bitter custody battle being what pushed her brother to the edge. This dynamic doesn't exist in the VN, but provides some small justification for his actions besides divorce always bad. It's such a small change you have to question why it was added, but to get that answer you'll just have to watch on. For now, Tomoyo continues to explain that the soccer trees were the first place she visited with her brother after he recovered. She doesn't want to see them torn down, and Okazaki is impressed in both versions that she transferred just for that. The anime then falls back into its theme-stripping ways, as it has Tomoyo oddly reaffirm to herself that everyone wants to save the trees, while in the VN we dip back into the cross-route theme of change as she admits the town changing might be inevitable, but she wants to fight it nonetheless. It's a line that's effectively in conversation with Okazaki's thoughts and afterstory around the hospital being built, and it's weird that the anime, which is a single connective narrative, is the one to intentionally remove this connection. But Okazaki's reaction to Tomoyo's story is also split between versions. In the VN, he sympathizes with his girlfriend's pain, hugging her close, while anime Okazaki is again stone-faced, making Tomoyo's choice to give this entire monologue to him retroactively hilarious. And what's finally gonna get Okazaki out of his slump? How about the return of the queen? It's interesting that the anime continues its isolated frame of Okazaki even now as Nagisa returns, showing how the emotional significance he's realized the relationship holds during their time away has suddenly made it harder for him to be casual with her. But this is short-lived as Nagisa walks up to thank him, and suddenly the other girls are entirely off-screen. Nagisa thanks Okazaki for helping Tomoyo, since he got suspended for the sake of the drama club, and Okazaki suggests she helps Tomoyo out as well, leading to an interesting adaptation of the post-basketball scene where the couple became official, even if they're not actually going out yet in this version. The help they end up providing is with Tomoyo challenging yet another club, tennis this time. Almost as a throwback to the VN drama club, the trio of Okazaki, Nagisa, and Tsunahara sit together helping Tomoyo, while the spurned harem looks on from beyond. Kyo works up the enthusiasm to suggest they move closer, but Ryo stops her. It's clear to both them and the audience that Okazaki and Nagisa have a thing going. Given they can't officially be dating yet, this use of an outsider perspective reinforces to us just how much these two like each other, and the entire sequence reminds me of a somewhat reliable social hack I remember reading about forever ago, that when laughing or celebrating in a group, people tend to look towards the person they're closest to, and in this case, Okazaki and Nagisa seem more interested in watching each other's reactions than the game itself. We then get some follow-up between Tomoyo and Nagisa, given they only met briefly at the Founders Festival in this version. Nagisa mentions she's the drama club prez, leading to Tomoyo finally realizing why Okazaki was so invested in helping her and thus the drama club. This moment mirrors a VN meeting I mentioned in part 1, where Okazaki can run into Tomoyo on the way to school with Nagisa and ask her about the election. Oddly, unlike this VN convo, anime Tomoyo still hasn't questioned why Okazaki is so invested in the drama club, although she at least gracefully accepts this revelation, unlike her VN counterpart who pathetically follows up by asking if Nagisa is Okazaki's sister. The game proceeds, but Nagisa is hit in the leg by a stray ball, continuing her anime badass streak by mentioning this means it's Tomoyo's point. This leads into a scene mirroring when Okazaki insisted on taking Nagisa to the nurse's office after she twisted her ankle in the VN, as he pushes away the other student trying to help Nagisa and limps off with her to the office. There's no official confession, but it's clear to the gathered girls what's up, and even randos stare. Oddly, anime Okazaki also comes off as more of a dick than his VN counterpart for once, since he slaps away the hand of a student just trying to help, compared to the VN where all the students and teachers are dissing Okazaki and telling Nagisa to get away from him. But while this moment ends strong in the VN, the anime has to spare some melodrama for the losers bracket. Kyo puts on a brave face as Ryo thanks her for her help, and they have a slightly over-the-top public breakdown. Everyone around them confused as to WTF is going on. The saving grace is how Ryo's comment reveals she knew all along her sister also had a crush on Okazaki, a confession taken all the way from the climax of Kyo's route. Kotomi is the only one who seems okay, either because she doesn't understand the social implications, or because her anime incarnation truly only has platonic feelings towards Okazaki. Still though, it's sad to see him totally ignore her for his new favorite girl. The anime episode, and this entire unique arc, ends with an announcement showing Tomoyo as elected president, something that's obviously a much more dramatic moment in her route given it marks a turning point in her and Okazaki's relationship. But who cares about that? Our anime drama club is finally ready to go. The next episode begins with an anime-only meeting of the new student council, with Tomoyo rubber stamping the creation of the drama club. Again in awe of the different scenarios the VN anticipated, a similar moment actually occurs in Nagisa's bad ending if you talk to Tomoyo enough, where they ask her for assistance after she's elected, but still hit a dead end due to not having an advisor. As the anime drama club is celebrating, Okazaki inelegantly brings up the next plot point, an upcoming school festival they can perform a play at. This, of course, is the Founders Festival in the VN, which in the anime's timeline already occurred during Fuko route, forcing it to fall back on this generically named second festival. In the VN, it's actually Nishina who introduces the Founders Festival right after agreeing to share Kimura as an advisor. That's right, despite all these anime-only shenanigans, we last left Nagisa's VN route way back at that meeting. In the VN, Nishina is the one to encourage Nagisa to participate, the two boys having skipped so much school they never heard of the festival. She also introduces a sense of urgency into the VN by revealing it's only 10 days out, a deadline that's left ambiguous in the anime. But in either case, Nagisa hesitates, until Okazaki encourages her to grab this opportunity they've been working towards for so long. V and Okazaki is still conflicted, wanting to spend their time going on dates instead, but to his credit, he decides he can selflessly wait 10 whole days. By contrast, anime Okazaki is of course absolutely psyched to see Nagisa's dreams beginning to come true. Our next big development is Okazaki's home visit, something the VN foreshadowed by having their teacher attempt to catch Tsunahara for his home visit earlier. In both versions, Okazaki attempts to avoid the situation by sneaking out of the teacher's office, only to run into Nagisa entering to talk to Kimura. He runs off, Nagisa in pursuit in the anime, while in the VN he kidnaps her at the drama club so they can have some alone time. Either way, Nagisa is confused. He just told her they should start working towards her dreams, but now he's running away? V and Okazaki attempts to distract her by going for a kiss, but the mood turns serious as he pulls close to Nagisa, Then, like in the anime, an announcement rings out calling Okazaki to the office, and Nagisa realizes the truth, evolving into the rare and considerably more dangerous Mad Nagisa. As Nagisa drags him to the office, V and Okazaki considers that this stunt must have lost him affection points, a mindset that seems to lampshade the VN's dating sim format, and you have a couple choices for how to win her back, including have Okazaki spam "I love you" at her until she laughs, saying that's the same thing her dad says to distract her mom. This was a surprising line since I made the exact same observation. Hilariously, we see V and Okazaki adapt this technique of saying "I love you" to distract Nagisa after witnessing Akio use the same technique on Sane earlier on in the VN. As much as they both deny it, it's clear how much Okazaki takes after Akio, which I guess says something about Nagisa as well. Regardless, Okazaki is dragged back into the office by Nagisa, much to the teacher's surprise, who comments Okazaki has mellowed out. The VN teacher gets weirdly personal as he asks if the two are dating, which Nagisa all but confirms. In both versions, Okazaki then leaves with the teacher for his home visit, only avoiding Nagisa tagging along as well by reminding her that she needs to be practicing. They reach Okazaki's house but no one's there, with V and Okazaki ruminating on how much being seen with a teacher hurts his delinquent cred. Despite his father being MIA, the anime teacher decides to wait inside as long as it takes, while his VN counterpart is even more hardcore, insisting he'll even wait outside when Okazaki lies and says only his dad has the key. It only takes a moment for his VN teacher to realize it is an obvious lie, but in both cases Okazaki has left him in the dust, to search for his dad. Anime Okazaki smartly decides to go to Sunohara's room, but is ambushed by Mad Nagisa who followed him to return his bag, while his VN counterpart is dumb as bricks and returns to the drama club to continue his alone time with Nagisa, who of course immediately realizes he's lying and like the anime drags him back. It's here the VN follows up on Okazaki's concern he's hurt the relationship, asking Nagisa if she could quantify how many affection points he'd lost, to which Nagisa bashfully admits he'll always be at 100%. They both reassure each other about how much they like the other, and Okazaki dismisses the concept of relationship points as unrealistic anyways, leading to Nagisa insisting that it's because it's the real world they can instead prop each other up and overcome painful things together. No foreshadowing there. V and Okazaki's approach towards this relationship has been pretty dislikable so far. These cut moments of the new couple working through their anxieties and insecurities is a genuinely compelling development in the VN. It helps how the two of them is not just crushing on each other, but as two people actively figuring out what it means for them to be a couple. But in both cases, the pair returns to find the teacher talking to Okazaki's dad, who dismisses the teacher's concerns and insists Tomoyo is his own person. He has no responsibility for him. Being from Okazaki's perspective, the VN makes it clear just how painful this is for him, as he considers how it's only when a third party is involved that he can't ignore the dismal state of this relationship, a comment that provides context onto why he freaked out and ran away when faced with sharing a breakfast with Tomoyo and his dad. But the anime shows off an equally heart-wrenching aspect of this conversation, as unlike the VN, we see Nagisa isn't even listening to the discussion. Her attention is immediately drawn to the pained look on Okazaki's face, as if responding to his emotions and prioritizing it as the most important thing in the world. The VN might be better at selling the two as a real couple, but the anime easily sells their genuine affection for each other better. In either case, Okazaki can watch no longer and they leave. But in the VN, we see how desperate Okazaki is for external support, harshly goading Nagisa for her prior words, asking her how he's supposed to make up with his father if they never fight. But despite this being a dick move, V and Nagisa apologizes, and, like in the anime, offers to let Okazaki stay with her, something that calls back to her VN-only offer from when Okazaki first ran away from his dad. There's no choice to make this time, though. Okazaki accepts, although in both cases we see Nagisa is also concerned about his dad, despite Okazaki dismissing her concerns. I think the strength of this relationship, in both versions, is how Nagisa cares about Okazaki beyond what he explicitly wants. She knows Okazaki needs to eventually mend his relationship with his father to move on, even if he only wants to run away. We next see Okazaki packing his things and preparing to leave. His father's drunk asleep, and Okazaki makes a passing attempt to wake him as he leaves, something the VN mentions he only did at Nagisa's insistence, but it's only as he reaches the door that his dad wakes and questions where he's going. Despite being from his point of view, it's pretty clear in the VN that Okazaki's perspective on his father is skewed, but in the anime it's even more obvious his dad is wrecked with sadness and regret as Okazaki leaves, despite Okazaki's later insistence that he didn't care. Okazaki leaves his childhood home for the final time, arriving at the bakery during the morning rush in the VN, while in the anime it's the dead of night, I suppose to avoid needing to animate additional customers. Either way, Akio conjures up my worst social anxieties as he pretends not to know why Okazaki is there, before Sanai confirms Nagisa told them both and they're on board with letting him stay. Nagisa shows him to his room in both versions, with her VN incarnation making the cute confession that a tiny part of her motivation for inviting Okazaki to stay was because she wanted to be with him as well. I also have to call out how deeply ironic Okazaki calling Nagisa a busybody becomes in the anime, given that in this version, he truly is the ultimate worrywart. The VN will describe this later, but the anime does a good job montaging over Okazaki's new life, highlighting the contrast between his prior home life as well as his discomfort being suddenly thrown into this tight-knit family. We see this again in both versions as Okazaki leaves the next day for school, unfamiliar with the ritual of saying goodbye to him as he leaves. And to Akio's credit, despite his usual abrasiveness, he sees Okazaki off as normally as he does his daughter. The Furukawas truly are the goats of the series, with how quickly they're able to accept others. The anime then skips to Kimura explaining play prep in the clubroom, something that happens after some not yet adapted Furukawa domestic shenanigans in the VN. In both versions, he'll explain they need sound, lighting, and costumes. Tomoyo's there too in the anime for some reason. In both versions, Sunohara uses the soundboard to put on a skit about stealing Nagisa away before being beat down by Okazaki in the VN, or by the much more dangerous combo of Kyo and Tomoyo in the anime. At least Anime Katome appropriately complements Suno's improv. In nothing else, the sequence highlights that even a goof like him has more acting chops than their club president. In the VN, they then move into discussing music, but this is split into a later scene in the anime, so we'll cover it later. Instead, the anime has a couple come home for the day. In the VN, Okazaki runs into Sane and is given a choice whether he likes her or not. A choice that'd be significantly less weird if the negative option wasn't phrased as, I already have Nagisa. While there definitely are some weird dynamics between Okazaki and Sane in the VN, the unique relationship he forms with both parents without Nagisa around in AfterStory is one of the crowning relationships of the VN. It feels like there's not much media that actually explores how the dynamic changes between a teen and an adult as the former slowly grows into an adult as well, becoming not just a kid, but an equal. However, as Okazaki enters his room, he's beset by kids in both versions, beaten down by a little romantic as he attempts to reclaim his stuff. Sane then enters the room, whipping the room into shape and apologizing to Okazaki in the anime, emphasizing her competence at teaching. The VN instead has her confused and unable to control the kids, which lessens the foreshadowing and makes her seem overly ditzy, but in both cases she explains this is a prep school she runs. Kicked out of his room, Okazaki is recruited into helping Akio, where he asks about Sane. Akio explains she used to be a schoolteacher, but provides few details. Interestingly, he gives us information openly in the VN, while in the anime it's clear he becomes guarded as soon as Okazaki brings it up. This plot point goes nowhere for a while in the VN, but the anime smartly introduces Nagisa's suspicion right afterwards. Nagisa enters Okazaki's room, and we get a conversation taken from the night before the play in the VN. The anime also provides some flirting to catch up with its quota, as Nagisa comments that while they often host others, it feels weird to have Okazaki living with her, because he's special. Despite not technically dating, they certainly aren't trying to hide it. Similar to the later VN conversation, Okazaki mentions that it's strange being around such a close family, and Nagisa admits she's lucky to have them, before explaining her suspicion that her parents are hiding something bad she did when she was younger, something she needs to apologize for. This is a great conversation, because it sets up her suspicion well in advance of the payoff, compared to the VN which has her conveniently bring this information up the same night her suspicions are confirmed. Still uncomfortable being around others, the anime Okazaki splits to head to Suno's dorm, using the excuse Suno will be lonely otherwise. It's a smart way to further emphasize Okazaki's discomfort with this new life, which makes sense given how starkly different it is compared to his prior home life. Anime Suno correctly guesses Okazaki was at Nagisa's house, but becomes envious when Okazaki accidentally reveals he's living there now. Okazaki tries to explain the pragmatic reasons in his discomfort, but Tsunohara can tell he's lying to himself, and points out this practically means Nagisa's parents approve of their relationship, and that Okazaki is hurting Nagisa by refusing to openly admit his feelings. We then get our first anime illusionary world sequence in a while. These have been occurring at regular intervals in the VN, meaning their storyline is far ahead of the animes. In the anime, we've seen the girl and the doll trying to build another friend, while in the VN we've already seen them build the doll, it failed to come to life, and the doll deciding to build something fun, a playground, but notices an ominous winter hanging on the horizon. And while these cutaways will continue in both versions, this latest scene in the VN is the furthest the anime's narrative will ever reach until AfterStory. It makes sense they want to spread these cutaways out across the next season as well, but it means we miss out on the looming sense of dread that begins to form in the VN's illusionary world sequences as we move into Nagisa Route's conclusion. When we return to the real world, we see Nagisa practicing her lines alone in the park. With Okazaki chastising her, it's not safe to be out alone due to how slow she is. Nagisa then displays one of my favorite aspects of this relationship, as she acts genuinely confused and hurt by his comments before revealing she was pranking him. She's used to his harsh words by now. I love how as the relationship progresses, Nagisa picks up on some of Okazaki's teasing tendencies, and Okazaki is similarly mellowed out by Nagisa's influence. That said, Nagisa's comment that she's used to Okazaki's harsh words does come off as slightly concerning in the VN, given how regularly derogatory he is in that version. They talk about the play Nagisa is planning in both versions, and Nagisa explains the plot, shocking Okazaki as he finds her description strangely familiar. The anime captures his impression in a fantastically visual way, by underlining Nagisa with a magic underglow as she talks, mirroring her appearance in the OP. And speaking of the OP, it's not just the anime which cuts to the OP here. For some reason, the VN randomly cuts to its opening video as well, something that will normally play on the title screen if you sit there for too long. It's a baffling decision, given it doesn't show up in the middle of any other routes, and I'm not sure why it was added here. But when the anime OP ends, we get the conclusion to the prior illusionary world scene. The robot friend they built won't move. No one else is going to be born into this world. But we can't exclusively focus on Nagisa Route, as the anime circles back to some earlier Yukine content, again adapted to bookend the Okazaki comes to terms with this feeling arc. We begin with Okazaki and Tsunohara hanging out in the ref room while we montage over students preparing for the Not Founders Festival. Tsunohara asks if there's a spell to tell who likes him, and Yukine reveals there is. This is the first minigame spell in the VN, before the one to get trapped in a supply closet, and like that one, who you meet depends on your prior choices. In both versions, Suno sadly runs out into the hall to see who will speak to him, which according to the spell means that they like him, but the anime adds Okazaki asking Yukine how girls like to be asked out, with Yukine immediately clarifying if he means for Nagisa. She mentions that timing is important, an odd comment that seems to exist as a justification for Okazaki waits until after the play to ask Nagisa out. In the VN, you're then given the choice to try this spell, but the anime neatly ties it in by having Yukine see Nagisa walking the halls, whereupon she encourages Okazaki to give it a try. In the VN, you can run into Nagisa, the Fujibayashis, Tomoya, or Mise, although there's a tinge of sadness to this encounter as by this point you're already locked out of their routes, meaning Okazaki can't reciprocate their feelings. It's also why Okazaki knows Kyo likes him when they're later locked in the shed together. But in the anime, Okazaki obviously runs into Fuko. In an anime-only cameo, Okazaki silences her before she can speak, which would fulfill the conditions of the spell, and sends her off doing the thriller, before Nagisa inevitably appears. The anime then catches back up to the VN as Nagisa explains the play's plot, not just to Okazaki but to the entire club. VN Okazaki disses the story as dumb, because he's an asshole, but is secretly interested in discovering the ending due to the story's strange familiarity. This leads to them checking the supply shed in both versions, guessing it might have been a story read to Nagisa when she was young, before Akio kicks them out. It's notable that Nagisa is clearly less invested in this discovery compared to Okazaki. We get some follow-up investigation in both versions, but first the VN has Akio propose a family picnic, a scene the anime moves to right before its payoff. The anime instead cuts to the VN's next sequence, as Akio pulls Okazaki aside to discuss a secret plan, switching locations as he repeatedly fails to hide their location from Sanae, with the anime humorously escalating to them eventually hiding out on the roof. It's here he explains Nagisa's past. In the VN he's vague, mentioning just that Nagisa nearly died once due to his and Sanae's selfishness, while in the anime he provides details he doesn't reveal in the VN until AfterStory, explaining how one day the two left a young Nagisa home alone for a half day while they went to work. She ended up waiting for them to come home outside in the snow and nearly died from the resulting fever, leading to the couple giving up their careers and starting the bakery so they'd never have to abandon her again. It's weird, and a little out of character, for Akio to divulge these secrets so openly, given he only reveals these details in the VN when Nagisa's life is again in danger in AfterStory. There's not much narrative purpose to adding this information here, and it makes much more sense for him to be cagey with someone who right now is just his daughter's high school boyfriend, making his choice to open up an AfterStory highlighting that Okazaki has now become an adult he can trust. Speaking of odd changes, the anime also has a suspicious line here where he clarifies the moral of the story, adding that while many people can balance chasing their dreams with raising children, they couldn't. It's a tiny addition, and calls back to my crack theory I brought up when we got Tomoyo's weird lesson about divorce. The Clannad's conception of family can sometimes become oddly bleak, like here where it kind of suggests parents shouldn't have dreams or ambitions outside their kids. And if you think that's an unreasonably uncharitable interpretation, you'd be right. I don't think you can walk away from just Nagisa's route with that impression. It's certainly not something I noticed until I reached AfterStory. And that's where my second crack theory comes in, that this change, alongside the minor addition to Tomoyo's story, is the result of the anime staff identifying this pessimistic implication in Clannad's VN as a whole, and these additions are the first examples of them subtly pushing back against it. It might seem like a reach, but why else would these small moments be added, especially with all the anime's other cuts, unless we assume the anime had some greater purpose behind it, a purpose I don't think makes sense to evaluate until we complete Clannad's narrative and can look back on both versions' themes as a whole. But theory crafting aside, Akio continues to explain how if Nagisa knew they gave up their careers for her, she'd think it was her fault, which is why they're hiding it from her. The anime smartly introduced Nagisa's fears beforehand, so we know Akio's concerns are warranted, while in the VN Akio generally mentions she's become suspicious as she gets older. Okazaki seems to accept this information without issue in the anime, but this revelation makes V and Okazaki deeply uncomfortable with his living situation, fearful he's encroaching into another family's secrets. It's after this reveal that the anime has Akio introduce the picnic, something Okazaki now skips showing up for in both versions. Okazaki's reason for ditching them is less apparent in the anime due to how it rearranged the prior sequences, but in the VN it's pretty clear the prior reveals what made him decide to be best to avoid interfering with their family gathering. The anime also had Sanae asking Okazaki what food he wants at the picnic, showing that despite his fears they're open to accepting him into the family, as well as showing Okazaki surprisingly thinking about how his dad's doing, before in both versions he escapes to Sunahara's dorm the next morning. Sunahara is surprised to find Okazaki there, and after getting bullied by the rugby club in the VN, he becomes uncharacteristically insightful in both versions, contradicting Okazaki's excuses and telling him Nagisa's only confident now because of him, and his sudden disappearance risks shattering that. The anime also puts a unique spin on this, as Sunahara points out that Okazaki's refusal to officially ask Nagisa out is only adding to her uncertainty towards his intentions. This is one of the few moments that makes V and Okazaki's unrelenting harassment of Sunahara not sit right with me, given that Suna is genuinely willing and able to support Okazaki when it really matters. The anime also frames this conversation in a cool way, the two sitting opposite each other, able to ditch their normal thoughtless banter for a vulnerable conversation only when they're no longer looking at each other's faces. In either case, Sunahara's comments are enough, and Okazaki runs out, meeting up with the Furukawa family in the anime, while in the VN he first runs into Nagisa alone. Once again, the VN shows the couple having an open conversation, as they both admit they're happy in their relationship, but anxious worrying about what the other thinks. They ultimately assure each other of their love, and in one of the cutest cut moments decide to have a hand-holding contest. Whoever holds on the longest likes the other more. Even as Akio appears, Nagisa doesn't budge, declaring him a formidable enemy, and she's not wrong as he tears their hands apart to give Okazaki a baseball bat, ending their contest in a tie. This isn't just an endearing moment of relationship development that the anime never has time for, it actually comes back in an emotional way in AfterStory, which the anime of course also cuts. By the way, Okazaki is pulled into a half-picnic, half-baseball game in the park, his stunt having ruined their original travel plans, but no one blaming him for it. As V and Okazaki and Nagisa sit watching Akio play baseball, the couple leans back and shares their first kiss, accompanied by Sanae's ass for some reason. We'll dive deeper into this in AfterStory, but this is as good a place as any to bring up the anime's odd sexlessness. It's an observation made by even casual observers. For a series that tracks a couple as far as marriage and having a kid, the anime never shows us anything more extreme than hand-holding. The VN isn't explicit by any means, especially not Nagisa's route, but as we see here, its couples are allowed to have a physical component to their relationship. Even after this analysis, I honestly don't have a confident answer as to why all physicality was cut in the anime, but I do think it's a loss. Despite all the VN's weird horniness, it does have more relatable moments of the young couple working through their physical attraction, something that's inevitably going to be part of someone's first relationship. But with kissing off limits, what does the anime do instead? Well, it instead pivots to address the anime couple's uncertainty about the other's intentions, ending on a gag where Akio accidentally tricks Nagisa into confessing she's in love with Okazaki. It's a change that highlights how different a place the anime couple's relationship is in compared to our VN pair, but both versions are successful in what they're going for. As they return, the VN has Akio and Okazaki execute their plan to search for Nagisa's story, but without luck. The scene is similarly adapted in the anime, but moved closer to her play for plot reasons. The VN then follows us up with an illusionary world sequence the anime doesn't adapt until AfterStory, with Winter coming and stealing the girl's energy. This is also where the VN places Komura explain what they need for the play, and the anime picks up the conversation from where it previously cut off. Our episode actually begins with the expanded club doing an assigned tongue twister exercise, something that would make sense for a theater club, if not for the fact only one of them is actually acting. I only bring this up because the scene allows for another of my favorite tiny relationship moments added in the anime, as Okazaki briefly pauses to just look down and admire Nagisa's serious concentration. Adding all these small moments was a genius move by the anime, and maybe I'm biased, but to me it also reflects the experience of falling in love more accurately than anything found in the VN, which, despite having access to Okazaki's thoughts, rarely convinces me he actually feels anything for Nagisa. The roles are then split up, with the expanded cast now a little overkill to cover just sounds and lights, especially as in the VN they decide they don't even need sound, just music. At least anime Okazaki gets an upgraded director. In the VN, Komura then sends them to the music room to find background music, where they run into Nishina, while in the anime Nishina just shows up in the club room the next day, assumably having been invited. Anime Nishina reads through the script, while in the VN she has to show off her talent by asking pointed questions about the tone and props of the show, using these details to gain a deep understanding of the play and its mood. Her character isn't too fleshed out in either version, but it's a cool moment that allows her to show how professional she is compared to our ragtag theater group. She then brings out a selection of CDs in the anime, while in the VN she returns the following day with a recording, explaining that she arranged the piece for piano herself and got a friend to record it. Truly a pro. Either way, they agree the piece fits perfectly. But even with the anime's expanded cast, none of them are any good at sewing, resulting in Okazaki recruiting Sane's help with the costuming, despite Nagisa feeling guilty about getting her involved. But now Akio wants to help too, and he reveals a theater recording to show Nagisa, leading to her dropping the bombshell that not only has her club president never been in a play, she's never even seen one. They watch the tape, with Nagisa more intently rewinding and studying it in the VN. Surprisingly, cynical VN Okazaki admits the play moved him, while anime Okazaki seems more interested in admiring Nagisa. What makes her happy, makes him happy. Okazaki then asks Akio if the story Nagisa remembers might be from a play, but Akio confidently assures Okazaki it wasn't, he'd know in that case, foreshadowing the reveal of his prior profession. With Nagisa distracted, the anime now adapts Okazaki and Akio searching through the storage closet, adding Akio wistfully looking over a photo book, before in a minor change, Sane calls them back and they have to haphazardly restack the boxes. VN Okazaki mentions intently watching Nagisa practice when they return to the clubroom in hopes of sparking his memory, but without luck. Anime Okazaki seems a little less invested in this mystery, although in both cases you'll have probably forgotten this plot point by the time it's actually explained in the ending of AfterStory. This is where Nishina appears in the anime, or when she returns with the recordings in the VN. The anime also adds Tomoyo appearing yet again, revealing she wears glasses and is still blushing around Okazaki, unnecessarily calling back to our prior melodrama by telling Nagisa she's glad she was the one Okazaki chose. Nagisa and Tomoyo then share a moment of camaraderie, promising each other they'll work hard. This is a moment taken from their hillside meeting much earlier in the VN. It made more sense there given at the time Tomoyo was still working towards the election, and Nagisa was still trying to reform the drama club. Looking over the room, Okazaki ruminates in both versions on wanting to share this feeling of camaraderie and shared purpose with the entire school, a rare moment in the VN where he admits the play means more to him than just a roadblock to going on dates. We then cut to the next day. The Founders Festival, or whatever generic festival replaces it in the anime, is close approaching, and Nagisa is obsessively focused on her script. Both versions of Okazaki fail to get her attention on the way to school, with the VN giving you a number of options to attempt to get her attention, but even Okazaki's strip-teasing or telling Nagisa he wants to do ecchi stuff with her only gets a half-hearted response. We then cut to the rehearsal prep, taking place backstage in the anime, while in the VN they start in the club room and move to the stage where they talk with Nishina, who in the VN performs before them. In the anime it's some random Rakugo guy. It's also here the anime sets up two unique things, as they mention it's dark backstage and they need to bring a flashlight, as well as Nagisa mentioning she feels guilty for getting so much help to achieve her dreams, to which Okazaki clarifies it's not only for her anymore, but for the entire school. But we don't see the rehearsal in either version, instead cutting to the couple returning to the bakery, where Okazaki reveals it went well. Akio wants him to lay on the praise harder, but Nagisa clarifies because Okazaki's harsh, she can trust his analysis. Akio then mega foreshadows AfterStory by claiming that if Okazaki has a daughter, he'll own her as well, a half-right prediction I guess, before Nagisa shocks them both by agreeing, because Okazaki and Akio are so similar. The VN follows this up with Sane adding Nagisa would make a good mom as well. Not sure if there's a roundabout endorsement of their relationship, since she clearly knows the two are dating, but as far as predictions go, it'll end up being about as accurate as Ryo's fortune-telling. We next cut to Okazaki in his room as Nagisa enters, too nervous to sleep, the VN even clarifying it's past her bedtime. For some reason Nagisa being nervous in general is a turn-on for VN Okazaki, a fetish so weird even she calls him out on it. This then transitions into Nagisa bringing up her suspicions that she did something bad to her parents when she was young. As discussed, the anime has already set the suspicion up, making it seem less like a contrived plot point, since Nagisa is introducing this out of the blue right before the big day. However, the VN justifies this suspicion better, as it has her explain that there's no pictures from around that time and that her parents dodge all her questions, making her fears more grounded than in the anime, where I guess she's just going off vibes. In the VN, she even correctly guesses it probably has something to do with her body being weak. It's a personality trait cut from the anime, but I wonder if the genesis of VN Nagisa's desire to live with strength despite her weak body was this vague feeling of guilt, leading to her not wanting it to hold herself or others back further. In either case, she expresses the desire to know what she did wrong so she can apologize, and Okazaki flashes back to Akio's words. A mistake since Nagisa notices and immediately calls him out, even citing his suspicious meetings with her dad in the VN. Okazaki considers if Nagisa should be told, but doesn't want to lay something so heavy on her right before the big play they've all been working so hard on, so lies to her, telling her she's too sensitive and should go get some sleep. This is also where the anime's tiny bits of added setup results in an interesting change to Nagisa's motivation. In the VN, Nagisa becomes surprisingly devious, suddenly dropping the issue and insisting she's going to bed and that Okazaki should do the same, clearly indicating she knows Okazaki is lying and is planning to go behind his back to find the truth. Even Okazaki suggests she should sleep in his room to calm her nerves, but she turns him down, not wanting Akio to kill him should they be discovered. But what's interesting is that in the anime, Nagisa accepts the lie, with Okazaki instead accidentally sealing his fate by reminding her to check her supplies. This leads her to search for a fresh flashlight, set up in their backstage discussion, before entering the supply closet and knocking over the poorly restacked tower of boxes Okazaki and Akio had to abandon, and like her VN counterpart discovers the secrets her parents had tried so hard to hide. And I find this change fascinating, given how much setup the anime adds just so it can avoid Nagisa lying to Okazaki. There's no further impact to this decision either way, but Nagisa's choice to actively seek out the truth despite Okazaki's wishes is a much more interesting decision, even if it does feel out of character, especially after her prior heart-to-heart with Okazaki. I'd be curious to know if the anime made this change because it agreed this was out of character, or because it wanted to keep Nagisa clichély pure and innocent. V and Okazaki can sense Nagisa's intent though, and lies awake straining his ears for any strange sounds before sleep takes him. In both versions, Okazaki then awakes in the dead of the night. In the anime, he just has to go to the bathroom, but in the VN, his blood chills as he realizes some loud sound will come up. In either case, he discovers Nagisa awake in the middle of the house, albums and mementos of her parents' past life surrounding her. Okazaki immediately sends her to bed in both versions, but the VN expands on this, with Okazaki cutting Nagisa off before she can say even a word, then staying with her until morning as she tries to get back to sleep. When he leaves her room in the morning, he runs into Akio, who similarly appears in the anime after Nagisa heads to bed. Akio curses the unfortunate timing, before we get one of his most impactful character moments, but only in the VN. In that version, you're given a choice to respond, to reassure Akio that he's a good father, or to tell him he's a failure of a parent. Just having the choice is heart-wrenching. Akio is normally so headstrong and irreverent towards Okazaki, but in this moment he's so shaken, he'll accept even this teenager's judgment either way. Fortunately, no one would ever select the bad father option, but it's this decision which determines if he appears during Nagisa's play to encourage her or not, which in turn determines if she can gather the strength to move forward, or fails and we get the bad ending. We unfortunately lose out in this development in the anime, maybe because there's no way the moment can hit as hard without it being presented as a choice, but we do get our next otherwise forgettable addition that supports my crack theory. In this case, it's from Sane's perspective, as the anime lingers at a journal entry amongst the items Nagisa scattered on the floor. In it, Sane expresses how happy she is with the unique opportunities being a stay-at-home mom has given her. Like with Akio's prior comment, this edition softens the idea that parents need to sacrifice all their personal fulfillment when having kids, by showing Sane was able to find happiness and purpose in her new life. And like Akio's comment, such an otherwise pointless addition, I have to theorize it was part of an intentional thematic change the anime is attempting to make to the source material. Nagisa is clearly depressed as the couple heads to school the next day, resisting Okazaki's attempts to distract her. She then continues the thought V and Okazaki had cut her off the night before, explaining Akio had a successful acting career, something that far outshines her impromptu drama efforts, and that she was a bad child for taking that away from him. For some reason, the anime has her explain this as they walk up the hill, while the VN doubles the impact by having Nagisa pause at the foot of the hill, calling back to the series' very first scene where Nagisa was unable to gather the courage to walk up that hill, and leading V and Okazaki to wonder if she's back in that place, even after all they've gone through, before taking her by the hand and dragging her up the hill. They then gather in the drama room, with Suno in particular zeroing in on Nagisa's discomfort. Okazaki tells him not to acknowledge it, and in another mega bro move, he distracts Nagisa by teaching her tricks to calm her nerves, an act even V and Okazaki can appreciate. In the VN, they soon move backstage, while the anime instead has them enjoy the festival first, with anime Nagisa actually able to distract herself and put on a happy face, insisting she can't ruin everyone else's hard work, as the two get a date montage. The two soon get separated. As Nagisa sees the ref room and remembers Yukine mentioning they have old theater recordings, she relapses and lies to Yukine so she can search for old videos of her dad. Searching for her, anime Okazaki runs into Sane, something he does intentionally in the VN in an attempt to run interference on her and Akio, fearing they'd shatter Nagisa's fragile concentration if they tried to meet with her before the play. In the anime, he instead departs to keep looking for Nagisa, eventually directed by Yukine to the ref room where he finds Nagisa glued to a recording of one of her dad's plays. As a side note, I guess this confirms Akio and Sane went to the same school as the current cast, something the VN seems to hint at, but to my knowledge is never confirmed. This headed moment drives the wedge into Nagisa's resolve, but arguably ups the melodrama a little too far, as we see a high school Akio on video declaring his love of theater and his desire to act forever. If nothing else, it does better highlight the difference between Akio and Nagisa's positions, despite being the same age. He was serious, talented, and with a plan for the future, while Nagisa is doing this on a whim without really knowing the first thing about acting. You can understand why she'd feel guilty in particular about her upcoming play. In either case, we return to the gang preparing backstage, with the anime adding a whole host of cameos in the audience, including Old Snake, I guess because he's Kotomi's guardian? Nagisa is still dead-eyed, and as the curtains open and Nagisa sees just how many people came to see her, anime Nagisa breaks. This is a great moment to trigger her complete breakdown. While the VN is less effective by having Nagisa react to the audience, bow, and only then breaks down, mouthing, "I can't do that," in answer to her earlier question asking if she can follow her dreams despite making her parents sacrifice theirs. The anime drama club is the first to realize something is wrong, then the audience as Nagisa openly breaks down on stage. Anime Kyo pressures Okazaki to close the curtains, but he holds firm. But when everything seems lost, Akio appears, throwing open the gym doors. Despite not finding the speech too moving when I first watched Clannad, this is one of the moments that brings me to tears now. In some ways I think Clannad's themes of family hit harder as we get older. And despite the VN occasionally straying into the bleaker aspects of this mindset, Akio's speech still remains a complete banger. He berates Nagisa in a characteristic way, telling her they didn't throw away their dreams, she's their dream now, and they'll support her ambitions no matter what they are. He calls out to Sanai, who offers words of encouragement, but in both versions it's Okazaki who has to make the final choice to support Nagisa, yelling out that she's fulfilling Suno and his failed ambition too. Unlike them, she finally has a chance to fulfill her school dream. Calm, Nagisa gathers herself and begins, repeating the lines we saw her first practicing under the street lamp. Shall I take you to a place in the city where wishes come true? Words that are ultimately validated in AfterStory's final ending. In the VN, the familiar illusionary world music comes in, before we slowly fade into that other existence. A legitimately magical moment given it's the first time we've entered it without a transition screen. The transition's a little less impactful in the anime, as we see a few moments from the play before it fades out to the illusionary world. It's a trade-off that has its merits too. Unlike the VN, we get to see at least a glimpse of the play they've been working so hard to prepare for, complete with some impressive looking lighting effects, assumedly a result of the anime's larger crew. In the anime, we see the robot remembering a warmer existence, and they decide to make something fun, a playground. It's a moment we progress far past in the VN, as we instead see the robot desperately trying to build a machine that will let them escape the winter to that warm place. A hopeless endeavor as unlike the girl, he cannot imbue junk with life. Powerless, he cries out, limiting the world's cruelty towards the girl before she appears and embraces him, leading him deciding to make a desperate scramble through the snow towards that warm place. It's a much more dramatic ending to the parallel narrative, and a moment we won't reach in the anime until after Nagisa's death in AfterStory. Given how much content there is in AfterStory, I understand the anime's choice to spread these moments out. The illusionary world is closely tied to AfterStory's ending, and it'll make even less sense if we've forgotten about it by then. At the same time, though, it makes the illusionary world plotline seem like even more of a random addition to Nagisa's route in isolation. Not only does this plot no longer sync up with Nagisa's play, but there's no real payoff here, even after following along for 22 episodes. We then fade back into the couple reflecting on the play, still in the schoolyard in the anime versus at the park in the VN. Nagisa says she's remembered the ending, revealing that after a long journey, they reach the warm place and sing. Thus, her decision to end the play by singing Dango Daikazuku was appropriate. Okazaki cracks back, saying they probably would have sung something different. And if you didn't know so in your first watch, this conversation is insane foreshadowing for the series' conclusion. The robot and the girl reaching the warm place is what allows Okazaki to return to Ushio's birth after her death, at which point the entire family sings Dango Daikazuku, meaning Okazaki is dead wrong here and Nagisa's choice is way more accurate than she could ever know. VN Okazaki compliments the play and tries to go for a kiss, but is cock-blocked by Akio, who really likes talking about his sperm in the VN in an attempt to gross out Okazaki. But in the anime, a different dad appears, with Nagisa uniquely having invited Okazaki's dad, although I double-checked and we don't see him in the audience montage. Okazaki still can't look at him, but offers a word of support as he leaves, telling him not to drink too much. I initially didn't understand the reason for this addition, but in retrospect I think it's proof KyoAni had their version of AfterStory fully planned by the time the first season was in development. I say that because one of the sequences cut in AfterStory is Nagisa and Okazaki visiting Okazaki's house again to see his dad and give them one more chance to interact before he's arrested. I think this moment here, although much less significant and sooner in the timeline, is a replacement for that, another meeting between father and son, as otherwise the two would have never interacted between Okazaki moving out and his dad getting arrested in AfterStory. But with parental duties complete, it's finally time for Okazaki to get his date. The anime montages into this, first showing the entire club celebrating before skipping to the next day and showing the couple walk through town together. A date which includes them visiting the arcade. Ironic given Okazaki criticizes Suno for doing the same on his route. In both versions, the date ends in the now empty drama club room, although their journey is a bit more exciting in the VN. VN Nagisa is much more hesitant about breaking in, especially when it involves dirtying her dress by crawling under a locked door to get into the clubroom, resulting in a cute confession where she admits she'll follow Okazaki anywhere, even if it means becoming a weird girl. Anime Okazaki has brought Nagisa here to ask her out, but VN Okazaki has much less pure intentions, as he fantasizes about what he could get away with now that no one's around. Although as previously mentioned, he seems to get off less in the act itself, and more in the thought that there must be other boys at school who think Nagisa's cute, and can only jealously fantasize about what he's now allowed to do to her. Nagisa's feelings, of course, never coming into the picture. But in both versions, Nagisa escapes Okazaki's machinations when she notices her name on the chalkboard and adds Okazaki's next to it. Again, I legitimately couldn't find where in the VN Okazaki added this to the chalkboard, but in the anime this calls back to his time alone at school, Nagisa's addition showing he's no longer alone. In the VN, these names are imbued with a slightly different symbolic meaning, as the two discuss how these chalk names will outlast their time at school, a monument to their relationship even as other theater clubs come and go. I'm not sure anyone would think back to this on their first playthrough, but it's a thought that better contextualizes Okazaki's outburst when he learns of the building's destruction in AfterStory, retroactively making these names a symbol of their childish belief in permanence. Our anime couple still needs to work up to that level of commitment though, and Okazaki takes the first steps as he asks Nagisa out with the same lame line he used in the VN, although it loses a lot of its impact now that our characters haven't just lost their one fun thing to work towards at school. Regardless, he follows it up with a proper confession, and Nagisa breaks down happy crying, but technically never answers before we cut to credits. It's an inevitably lamer confession than in the VN, and it feels like something you could find in any high school romance anime, but whatever, it was a necessary plot point. And with that, we've reached the end of the anime's first season, but there's still a couple key moments left in Nagisa route that won't be picked up until midway through the next season. We'll skip a bit ahead and discuss those before wrapping this video up, but first let's jump back to Okazaki and Nagisa's date now that we've reached the OVA. As a reminder, this occurs in the VN during May's visit, while the anime adapts it during summer break after the first season's ending, during yet another visit by May. The OVA begins with some unique content, setting up the anime's fresh relationship as Okazaki and Nagisa walk to school together, both nervously working up the courage to hold hands. It's a stark reminder of how much more their relationship has progressed in the VN, and honestly feels cliché compared to the more nuanced emotional jitters and open discussions the VN couple went through at the start of their relationship. But the anime couple encounters an additional roadblock, as Kyo pulls right through their clasped hands on her scooter, making fun of them before we get to the girls in the clubroom, getting the tea from Nagisa. Tomoyo is there as well for some reason, and calls out Nagisa for not referring to Okazaki by his first name. We quickly call back to the anime-only moment where Fuko encouraged the couple to do similar, but this time it sticks. From here on out, she begins referring to Tomoyo-kun as such. We then cut to Okazaki in Sunahara's room, clearly being interrogated in the same way, as Suna surprised they haven't gotten any further than holding hands. Mei then appears, with Misei repeating the gag of telling Sunahara cute girls here to see him, before we cut to Mei hanging out with the Furukawas again, oddly never commenting on the fact Okazaki's living there now too. The next morning further sets up the upcoming events as anime Okazaki sees the two girls tired in the morning, admitting they stayed up late gossiping about him, something V and Mei similarly admits to when Okazaki visits the bakery to see them. In both versions, Nagisa explains she and Mei are going to watch the bakery to thank her parents for letting Mei stay there and to give them a break. V and Okazaki is disappointed by this turn of events, since this was their first day off school since becoming a couple. In both versions, Akio excitedly runs off to spend his free day playing baseball. V and Sanai just chills in her room, while in the anime she instead goes to a neighborhood meeting, a small reference to a trip she similarly makes in her cut AfterStory route. Before she leaves though, I have to quickly highlight how much the anime improves this gag of Mei trying Sanai's bread by adding the sound of breaking glass as she takes a bite, before masterfully dodging Sanai's request for feedback. In both cases, it becomes quickly apparent 3 is overkill for manning the bakery, leading to Mei running out to find customers with some technically correct advertising, leading to record sales. I'm actually a little disappointed that Vian didn't have a special background for this. We then get Akio distracting Sanai from his criticism of her bread with his patented I love you technique, leading to anime Mei encouraging Okazaki to do the same. Unhappy with the couple's bashful response to this comment, her Cupid scheme is thus inspired in the anime. We then return to Suna's room in both versions, where he sulks over the fact Mei is ignoring him. Eventually she appears, but she's here to talk to Okazaki, a gag the anime already used, but in this case she explains her desire to play Cupid in both versions. This is followed by back-to-back gags of Okazaki first assuming she means for herself in Suno, then for him in Sunahara. V and Okazaki continues to remind us he's a certified freak, as when Mei clarifies that, despite their differences, she and Suno are related by blood, Okazaki insists that's what makes it hot. Anime Okazaki instead further supports a claim I've made in this episode already, blaming the outburst on Akio's personality rubbing off on him. In either case, Mei explains she feels Nagisa and Okazaki aren't being honest with each other, and asks him what he'd like to change about Nagisa. You can choose to answer Nagisa's perfect as she is to shut this side quest down, but if you continue, Okazaki, like in the anime, mentions he wishes Nagisa was more confident, with V and Okazaki going so far to say it'd be just about right if she became a narcissist, while it actually justifies the shenanigans to come. In the VN, Mei leaves to execute on this scheme, while in the anime a clearly pre-coached Nagisa coincidentally appears then and there. Mei's pulled an Ozymandias. Nagisa then brings Okazaki on a manufactured date, doing her best to embody a narcissist as she tells Okazaki he should consider himself lucky to be with a cute girl like her, and forcing him to treat her to a cinnamon roll at the bakery, despite Akio insisting they don't have to pay. That's not to say Akio doesn't support her ambition though, with V and Akio humorously agreeing that Nagisa should take advantage of all the men in her life and bleed them dry. This leads to the oddest date moment, as Nagisa insists she can't split the cinnamon roll, but to give Okazaki a taste she takes a bite and lets her breath waft over him. Okazaki is stone-faced in the anime, but some freak in the writer's room must have been into this, since in the VN you can have Okazaki ask Nagisa to do it again, and he admits that despite being clearly out of character for her, it made him happy as a man, whatever that means. I guess I should just be glad we don't get a repeat of the food sharing technique from KyoAni. Nagisa is about to cry before Mei appears, Okazaki wondering if she blackmailed Nagisa. We actually get a different answer in each version, with V and Nagisa explaining she lost a game last night and this is her penalty game. The anime improves this motivation, with Nagisa instead explaining Mei convinced her Okazaki had been holding back for her sake and she had to take the lead as the older partner. Analysis might be true for anime Okazaki, but certainly not a concern for the VN's turned on by physically forcing her against her will Okazaki. In either case, Nagisa is concerned Okazaki now thinks she's a weird girl, but anime Okazaki admits her analysis might be right and takes her by the hand on a proper date, leading to Nagisa promising to follow him anywhere, a line taken from their drama club room date in the VN, before they ruin the moment by psychopathically leaving the half-eaten cinnamon roll behind on the bench. In the VN, Mei gets some additional comeuppance, as Nagisa refuses to go with her and matter-of-factly sends her off so she can have some proper alone time with Okazaki, before she and Okazaki decide to split the cinnamon roll, like normal people, and go for a walk. And that's it for our one anime date. Well, in the VN, this leads into Mei leaving and into the previously discussed basketball match nonsense. Overall, it's a cute addition, and I'm glad we get some couple energy from an anime pair, but compared to the relationship development we get in the VN, it does come off as a little cliche and underbaked. I'd also be remiss not to mention the cute alternative date if you choose not to interact with Mei in the VN, where the two plan a date and discuss if they should tell Nagisa's parents about their relationship, who absolutely already know, before Nagisa again is roped into watching the bakery instead. This gives Okazaki the choice to help out as well, and they share a cute moment where Nagisa teaches Okazaki how to work the register, as well as a follow-up choice where the pair can get chided if Okazaki attempts to get a little too chummy and inadvertently scares off a customer. But with the date out of the way, let's quickly wrap up the conclusion to Nagisa's route. In the anime, this takes place in episode 9 of AfterStory, following a whirlwind adaptation of Baseball, Mei, Misei, and Yukine route. I'll cover those arcs in a follow-up video, and while our main couple doesn't get any concrete relationship development during those episodes, they've basically reached a similar point in their relationship compared to their VN counterparts. Off-screen, I guess. Episode 9 starts by returning to the anime-only theme of uncertainty towards the future, which he introduced during the Nagisa's sick route. In an anime-only conversation, Nagisa mentions there's nothing she wants to study in college, so is considering job hunting. This later continues with the twins explaining their plans, Kotomi revealing she's going to America to study, something that ironically also happens in her route's bad ending, and Tsunohara convinced he's going to be a model. Only Okazaki has no plans for after graduation. Nagisa, looking out for his best interest, attempts to get an answer out of Okazaki, but further displaying its genius remixing talents, the anime has Okazaki use a distraction technique his VN counterpart attempted after being caught running away from his home visit. In the VN you have 3 choices to distract Nagisa, and the anime adapts the give a gift option, where Okazaki tries to bribe Nagisa. In both versions, she claims he can't give her a gift for no reason, and if his reason is just because he likes her, well, then she needs to get him a gift every single day as well. A cute moment in the VN, but the only real occurrence of the couple openly discussing their feelings in the anime. But the genius is in the fact that the anime didn't adapt this just for the gag, as in both cases Nagisa then explains she only gets 1 gift a year because her birthday's on Christmas Eve. A throwaway detail in the context of the VN, but a smart setup in the anime given we see her combined birthday celebration later in the episode. But it's as they're talking that anime Nagisa again falls suddenly sick. In the VN, Okazaki instead notices Nagisa has a fever as they walk home from their drama club room date, via Nagisa admitting she'd been trying to hide it as to not ruin the date. We next get one of my favorite interactions between Sanae and Okazaki, something the anime of course cuts. I guess because removing Akio and Okazaki's heart-to-heart alone was enough to satisfy it. In the VN, Okazaki apologizes to Sanae for dragging Nagisa around, which Sanae dismisses. She's his girlfriend after all, isn't she? Given how obvious the couple's been, it makes total sense she knows, and she continues by asking to call Okazaki Tomoyo-san, a comment the anime moves to after Okazaki graduates in AfterStory. It's a small change, and the VN Sanae seems to be acknowledging Okazaki as something close to family given how much he's helped their daughter, while its timing in the anime causes the comment to be instead read as her now recognizing him as an adult. VN Sanae then follows up with a bit of maturity that contrasts their young lovers, as she asks that, because Nagisa's body is weak, Okazaki stay with her as long as he can. Not forever as the couple repeatedly promises each other, but as long as he can. It's a tiny difference, but it highlights the maturity Sanae has compared to the young couple love-struck in their first relationship. The anime instead takes a moment to highlight our couple's larger support cast, as we briefly see Misai and the others give their well wishes and encouragement to Okazaki. It's a nice montage acknowledging the additional relationships they've developed in this version, and an appropriate send-off for the anime's larger cast, given many of these characters can count the remaining screen time in seconds. In both versions, Nagisa is forced to remain at home while Okazaki leaves for school. Interestingly, only the VN provides some resolution to the family drama that centered the school play arc, as V and Akio mentions he'll discuss it with Nagisa after Okazaki leaves. But what do we get instead in the anime? Botan jump scare. This adapts Botan's second VN appearance, something that occurred way back when the trio were trying to recruit Komura in the VN, and can occur in multiple routes. If you're not close with Kyo, Okazaki automatically throws the plushified pig back at Kyo before she leaves, while if you're headed towards her route, you can choose for Okazaki to take Botan instead, which backfires horribly for whoever took her. It's interesting the anime decided to adapt this scene here, and anime Kyo even admits it was a scheme to distract Okazaki from his Nagisa-deficient depression. Days drag on, but Nagisa doesn't get better, something that doesn't change even as weeks and months pass. The entire summer passes in the VN, then into fall and winter, a duration anime Nagisa is fortunately spared on account of the anime's extended timeline. It might seem like a small change, but this difference makes Nagisa's sickness significantly more devastating and arguably supernatural in the VN, with it having more time to emphasize Nagisa's inability to recover as well as the frustration the couple feels, with Nagisa even crying herself to sleep at her own powerlessness in the VN. In both versions, Okazaki diligently stays by Nagisa's side, even as she encourages him to go out and have fun, going so far to suggest he find a new girlfriend in the VN. It's an understandable suggestion though, as V and Okazaki repeatedly tells her about his frustration not being able to spend time at school as a couple with her, even after he waded through the basketball and play nonsense. Anime Okazaki also mentions wanting to go on a date holding hands, but the way he frames it in the VN makes it seem like he's frustrated not being rewarded after putting up with all of it, and not acknowledging the time they work together as a couple as being valuable in itself. Either way, they can't go on a date now, so hold hands regardless. The anime always puts so much care into anime in the way the two join hands, maybe because it knows it can't show any other physical contact. And as if anime Okazaki needed to do any more to contrast against his superficial VN counterpart, we get an added scene where he talks to Yukine, who again highlights the help the couple had provided her, something I'll get to in my next video, so he can borrow a theater recording for Nagisa to watch in bed. Truly an S-tier boyfriend. We also get the anime-only appearance of winter uniforms. I know nothing of Japanese high school, but how many uniforms do they have, and why do all of them have to include miniskirts? But returning to the shared content, we next get a meeting between Okazaki and Nagisa's parents, who let him know Nagisa might need to repeat again, and they want him to accept Nagisa's decision either way. That's one thing Okazaki can't handle though, and he understandably expresses that he doesn't want to graduate without Nagisa, doesn't want to leave her behind. In both versions, Akio points to Nagisa's feelings in this matter as being more important, but V and Sanae backs Okazaki up by acknowledging it's painful for both of them. The VN oddly has Akio jokingly suggest Okazaki repeat as well if he cares so much, but in the anime this is Okazaki's proposal, only for Akio to shoot him down for being immature. It's a flip-flop that better fits their evolving dynamic, where Okazaki is becoming increasingly aware of how immature he is compared to the older adults. We then get a couple added moments in the anime, first showing Okazaki in the career office, followed by a callback to his earliest meetings with Nagisa as Okazaki sits in the courtyard, watching other students talk up on the roof, but like Nagisa is unwilling to wave at them. He's now in the same lonely situation Nagisa was at the start of the school year. Next up is Nagisa's birthday, a humble affair with just her parents and Okazaki in the VN, but a much livelier gathering in the anime with the entire assembled cast, Santa Tsunohara included. Nagisa then opens her combined birthday Christmas present, the first of the stuffed dongas, which V and Okazaki clarifies he spent ages searching for. Nagisa gets self-conscious, and the VN due to not having a gift for Okazaki, and in the anime due to the overwhelming support from her gathered friends, but Akio reminds her that they're all happy as long as she is. They then sing Dango Daikazuku in the VN, even Okazaki joins in, while the anime instead has them take a group photo. As we fade out from that happy scene, we learn in both versions that a dour decision was made that same day. Nagisa will repeat the school year. With how long the anime has dragged out Okazaki's school year, the next cut comes as much as a shock to us as it does to him. It's graduation. He stands with Sunahara, asking if breaking windows will let him repeat, but Suna clarifies he'd just be expelled. In the anime, Komura appears, and we get a few parting words, but that's part of Komura route, so we'll tackle that later, and we get some final anime-only send-offs for our wider cast. It's an appropriate goodbye, since just like graduation can sever friendships IRL, this marks our end as a constant part of the show. As part of this, we see Tomoyo clarify the sakura trees were saved, and Okazaki encourages the two juniors, Tomoyo and Yukine, to look after Nagisa. Kyo's got the gang all gathered for a party, even including the choir girls, which is a nice addition, but she knows better than to rope Okazaki into it, reminding him that there's someplace else he needs to be. As Okazaki reaches home, he finds Nagisa waiting for him at the foot of the hill in both versions, dressed in the same outfit as during their clubroom date, their only real date in the VN. The conversation plays out similarly in both versions, with Okazaki expressing his regret at graduating without her, explaining he hated school, but because Nagisa was there, he wanted to go on forever, and how he only wished they could have had one day walking around school as a normal couple. Okazaki starts to cry here, absolutely breaking down in the VN, saying he should have repeated, but just as anime Akio predicted, Nagisa didn't want that, and she tells Okazaki she wants him to continue moving forward. She then holds out her hand. Even if they can't be a couple at school anymore, they can still spend time together here, and the two leave hand in hand. V and Okazaki ruminates on if Nagisa will have the strength to start up that hill again, now without his support, which, by the way, is such a great metaphor, I'm glad the VN keeps coming back to it, before deciding that yes, he's sure she can. And, well, that's all we get for an ending. But since this final episode is adapted in the middle of the anime's second season, a watcher will continue right into AfterStory without even knowing a split originally existed. But in the VN, this is a complete ending, even if it's not as narratively satisfying as the other routes. And if you haven't yet completed the other endings required to unlock AfterStory, it might be a while before you get to continue Nagisa's story and get a conclusive resolution to her arc. As a result, it's a little weird to compare it as an ending, since Okazaki asking Nagisa out at the end of the anime's first season similarly serves as a temporary ending to her route in that version. But still, I think it's a strong standalone conclusion for Nagisa and Okazaki's arcs, especially in the VN. We go full circle from Nagisa alone at school and Okazaki giving her strength, to Okazaki alone at school and having to rely on Nagisa for support. And while this narrative arc is disrupted by all the other content the anime shoves in between, it also sets up a smoother transition into AfterStory by introducing Okazaki's lack of future plans before Nagisa falls sick, something he'll now have to grapple with as graduation catches up to him and he suddenly finds himself on the precipice of entering the real world in less than an episode, an experience probably relatable to most of us that have graduated. So before we start discussing the major plot changes, I want to focus on how different our main couple has become between versions. I mentioned it in my first video and it continues to rear its head throughout Nagisa's arc. Despite sharing the same names, anime Okazaki and Nagisa are clearly different people from their VN counterparts. The general trend of the anime's changes is to make our main couple a little more likable and a little less tropey, but by doing so it also removes a lot of their original complexity. Okazaki in particular gets the largest facelift, as especially in this VN route, he's kind of an unlikable dick. He's needlessly mean to Nagisa, Sunahara, and anyone else who annoys him, and his main interest in Nagisa once they start dating seems to be a weird horny desire to order her around against her will. But more narratively interesting is that he gets to begin the route as a deeply misanthropic, hopeless individual, a mindset his immediately helpful and active anime counterpart never really displays. And this means our main character has a lot less room to change over the course of the narrative in the anime. It makes his arc less compelling than the VN where we get to stew in Okazaki's depressing thoughts and meaningless routine for days before his interactions with Nagisa, or other Clannad girl of choice, begin to slowly bring purpose into his life. Similarly, while he's still a good person at heart, Okazaki's position as a delinquent, someone treated as an outsider by his peers, is a key piece of characterization in the VN. In contrast, anytime the anime tries to bring up this character trait, it comes off as unexplored and frankly laughable, given Okazaki is the center of a massive friend group and spends all his time helping others out, a trait that makes him a little less unique and a little more in line with the standard issue anime protag. And while it's a shame the anime doesn't get to explore these character elements, it also seems like an intentional choice to help facilitate the anime's expanded plot, which requires Okazaki to more actively engage in other characters' lives. Nagisa is similarly smoothed down for the anime. Her cripplingly poor self-esteem and over-the-top airheadedness comes off as a tad unrealistic in the VN. By toning down these traits, the anime makes her more naturalistic and believable, but again sacrifices some of the traits that made her character unique in the VN. I absolutely love that her character was made more active in the anime, having her and not just Okazaki be involved in meeting the wider cast. But just like with Okazaki, her immediate inclusion into the anime's massive friend group makes her arc less impactful, since we never really get to see her in the legitimately isolated position she starts the school year off in. And while both versions of the character clearly begin to be influenced by Okazaki's personality as the route goes on, the anime loses out on her cute acceptance of becoming a delinquent, learning to accept her ostracized position and publicly announcing her friendship with the school's other undesirables. And this isn't to criticize the anime too harshly, since making our main pair more likable and believable isn't just a superficial improvement, but also makes me way more invested in everything they do. But the narrative depth it loses out on was compelling as well, since in the VN's narrative the couple's romance isn't only about liking each other, but a story of two people outcast by society standards coming together to find strength in each other. In the VN, Nagisa, Okazaki, and even Sunahara are all individuals ostracized because they don't fit into the mold of a normal student due to circumstances outside their control, but are able to find camaraderie and success working together despite that. And while the anime pays lip service to this idea, it just doesn't stick given how well adjusted Okazaki and Nagisa are from the start. Both immediately pick up a gaggle of friends, and neither begins in as depressing a place as in the VN, making their success feel equally less earned. No matter how convincing the anime can be in the moment, when Okazaki breaks down in the ending expressing how he hated school before meeting Nagisa, I don't believe him, and I can't fully invest myself in the scene, because we've constantly seen Okazaki having a blast at school, even ditching Nagisa to hang out with Katomi and the other gaggle of girls. Even the anime's longer timeline works against the tragedy of the arc, as instead of having only a single magical month together with Nagisa, anime Okazaki's had the better part of the school year to hang out with her, making her subsequent disappearance a much less heartbreaking turn. And nothing highlights this difference more than when the arc's big confession is placed. In the VN, it occurs at the character's lowest moment. Okazaki supporting Nagisa after her single humble dream at school is crushed. But in the anime, the relationship only goes official after all their goals have already been accomplished. They come together not as two outsiders finding support in each other, but in a cliché happy ending. And the result is, no matter how well the anime executes the minute-to-minute plot, its narrative ends up feeling much less dynamic and much more generic compared to the original. In some ways, I wonder if this is why the first season is often overlooked as boring by anime watchers who are already familiar with the standard tropes and character templates of the genre, compared to AfterStory, where the anime is finally able to fully focus on adapting only a single VN route. And while all these changes are a disappointing loss, it was an inevitable trade-off as soon as the anime's structure was decided. Of course, stitching in a bunch of content from other characters' narratives dilutes the arc of the route, compared to the VN where each route can be a standalone experience that focuses on just 2 or 3 characters. But at the same time, an anime that only focused on Nagisa route would have felt incomplete, and given how much fun we get out of the anime's expanded cast and their interactions, I find it hard to say it was an entirely bad trade-off. And speaking of trade-offs, the other obvious change the anime makes is the removal of Okazaki and Nagisa's relationship from the second half of the plot. In fact, most of the VN's romantic routes shack the characters up by the first half of the arc, giving the VN plenty of time to explore how their relationship evolves after becoming a proper couple. A format myself, and I think a lot of others prefer to the characters only get together at the ending format, although at least in Clannad we do get an entire second season with the characters dating. But it's not as if the anime has nothing unique to offer in terms of the dynamic between its main pair. If I was to boil it down, I'd say the anime excels at conveying a compelling relationship between the characters, while the VN is uniquely successful at exploring the pair as an actual couple. What do I mean by that? Well, as I've previously called out, the anime does a fantastic job convincing me these two characters genuinely care about each other and are absolutely in love, an essential element for getting the viewer invested in the characters and their relationship. By contrast, I find the VN struggles to accomplish this, largely due to the character changes we already talked about. Unlike his anime counterpart, VN Okazaki is more willing to disrespect Nagisa's emotions and desires to benefit his stereotypical version of their relationship. Anime Okazaki is clearly psyched watching Nagisa pursue her dreams, while VN Okazaki seems to largely put up with helping her, seeing it as more of an inconvenience stopping them from doing normie couple things. Nagisa isn't nearly as bad in that regard, but her exceedingly low self-esteem and over-the-top clinginess also impacts my investment in the relationship, since it comes off less as her developing a genuine crush, and more as either the writer's poorly disguised wish fulfillment or as her attaching herself to the first person that gave her any affection. I'll let you decide for yourself which scenario is more depressing. But the impact of this is that I find myself caring less about the relationship. After all, why should I invest myself in a superficial relationship where the guy seems more invested in just having a girlfriend at all to drag around, more than who his girlfriend is in particular? And while part of this change is the anime clearly writing the relationship differently, some of it again is inherent to the format differences. The VN is a dating sim after all, so VN Okazaki ultimately does choose Nagisa because of the player's choices. Of course the connection feels less special. But where the VN succeeds beyond the anime is in effectively exploring the pair's development as a couple. Even if the characters' interest in each other is less than compelling in the VN, it's still able to create an interesting arc that continues into AfterStory, exploring how these two people move from separate individuals to a couple, from the early jittery stages to misunderstanding each other, to opening up and working through it. And for all the VN's weird, legitimately off-putting horniness, I do think it helps that VN Okazaki and Nagisa are clearly, well, attracted to each other, in a way we don't see in the anime due to its weird sexlessness. So even if the anime sells the characters' emotional connection better, we never actually see them working through the process of figuring out how to interact as a couple. Not to spoil my next video, but despite Okazaki and Nagisa dating throughout the anime's next few side arcs, it never has time to circle back to develop this aspect of their dynamic. As a result, their status as a couple feels hollow in the anime basically until they get married, which is an issue because that's one of the juiciest and most compelling aspects of their relationship now that they're officially going out, and should be one of the core pillars of the narrative given that we're going to be following along their relationship progress for the rest of the series. Well, at least until episode 17. So why did the anime remove this content, especially when they arguably improved in the characters themselves? Well, I think the most obvious answer is, say it with me again, the difference in format. The VN route is all about Okazaki and Nagisa's relationship, but even as it's adapting Nagisa route, the anime constantly has to work in content for other side routes, leaving time to hit the major plot points of Nagisa route, but not for a bunch of character-focused relationship building between just the two of them. Although to be honest, I also think this sort of romance is something that KyoAni just isn't good at for some reason, since we get some even more egregious cuts to the couple's development during AfterStory. And a great example of this trade-off is the anime's unique concoction tying together the bits it adapts from Tomoyo, Yukine, and Kyo route. It's clear by this point the anime felt it needed to adapt at least some portion of their routes, so instead of spending time building up our main couple's relationship, it throws Nagisa out of the way. But what's fascinating is that instead of spending this time exclusively focused on other girls, it uses the other girls as content to deep dive into Okazaki's emotional state as he figures out what Nagisa means to him with a level of nuance the VN never achieves. We again see a greater emotional depth between the main couple, but lose out on actually developing their dynamic. In some ways it's a strangely metatextual adaptation. In the VN he goes out with Nagisa basically because the player chose it, while in the anime he has an entire added arc discovering that despite having all these other options, Nagisa really is the only one for him. That's not to say some of the added scenes during this anime-only arc aren't a little over the top or melodramatic, but more than anything it highlights the anime staff's mastery at remixing moments and themes from the VN in totally different contexts and points in the plot. And if nothing else, it's refreshing and a little bit hilarious for this type of anime to see Okazaki having the emotional maturity to recognize the other girls' advances and stone-facedly reject them instead of getting flustered and freaking out. In terms of other notable changes, we have the standard suite of cuts and timeline mix-ups to better fit the anime's pacing. Unlike Fuko and Kotomi route, where I found the reordering events reduced the build-up and payoff of tension, the timeline changes in this route were largely inoffensive. Of course, there's inevitably going to be some great moments cut, in this case due not only to the time constraints, but also the characters not dating. Nagisa and Okazaki's hand-holding contest was one of the moments I'm saddest was cut, especially since it pays off in one of my favorite scenes in AfterStory. Akio and Sani also have some of their most emotional moments with Okazaki removed, which are less understandable cuts in my opinion. My best guess is that the anime just had less time to develop these relationships, which is a shame because the slow transition of Okazaki's relationship with the Furukawas being one of a kid to adults, to part of the family, to a young adult versus the more experienced adults, to finally both being adults who treat each other as equals is a type of development that feels utterly unexplored in anime. This is also the route I've complained the least about the anime cutting the VN's thematic content. It still happens, of course. The VN uses the walk up the hill as a beautiful, reoccurring metaphor for the strength to move forward in life, an idea largely removed in the anime, probably because it's difficult to invoke without having access to Okazaki's internal thoughts. Less understandable is the continued removal of the theme of change, as in Tomoyo's monologues, but just this once I'll forgive it, since the anime actually adds to the route's thematic depth at a couple of points, mostly during the game against the basketball team. Despite there being an obvious connection between this game and Okazaki's prior negative basketball experiences, for some reason only the anime actually links these events, adding thematic depth to the game and Okazaki's victory not present in the VN. It's also worth noting the different pace the anime adapts to the Illusionary World segments. As I already mentioned, the VN's narrative reaches its climax with Nagisa's play, the girl and the robot making a desperate attempt at escape, while the anime lags far behind, but that's a narrative trade-off you can't fully evaluate until you reach AfterStory. And speaking of, I'm excited to finally move into that, since some of the anime's most interesting changes, both positive and negative, are present there, although you might be able to guess the general trend by how we've seen KyoAni approach Nagisa route. If your guess is that they'll continue to remove a lot of the themes, character arcs, and relationship moments, while making the characters more relatable and the emotional moments hit even harder, well, you'd be halfway there. We'll also get to fully explore my crack theories I only just introduced in this episode, even referencing the anime's single-episode adaptation of Tomoyo route and the infamous route. And while I don't think anyone would walk away from Nagisa route with such a pessimistic reading of the VN's themes, you can already see the first scraps of evidence that support my thesis. We see through Tomoyo's story about her brother, as well as Akio and Sani's backstory, that the VN positions family as one of the most important aspects of life. But, as Tomoyo's backstory is probably the grossest example of, the VN also seems to have a very superficial view of what makes family important. And while it might not be apparent yet, Okazaki's often superficial and misogynistic motivations for going out with Nagisa will begin to coalesce into this darker theme as well. After all, what sort of family are they going to form when Okazaki's investment in the relationship often boils down to the base social and personal fulfillment having a girlfriend provides, and not, anything specific about Nagisa? And I'm not suggesting there aren't moments in Clannad that directly contradict this reading, or that any first-time viewer would walk away with this impression. I certainly didn't. It's an interpretation that only becomes apparent once we reach some of AfterStory's bleaker moments. But once we become aware of it, I do think we can trace the roots back to these more innocuous details. And that in itself is the first evidence of my truly crack theory, that the anime staff also recognized this darker interpretation and decided they weren't down with that. Because these tiny tweaks to the context of Tomoyo's brother's bridge jumping, Akio and Sani's forgettable added comments, none of these changes make sense if we view the first season in isolation. I can only read it as evidence that KyoAni came to the same conclusion I presented above, and decided to make fundamental cross-route changes to how the narrative frames family, removing these bleaker undertones and presenting a more positive, emotionally nuanced concept of what family means. Not only does this show KyoAni had a deep fundamental understanding of the original text, it highlights their studio's unique season-spanning planning, since the more substantial changes, stuff an average viewer might actually notice, don't appear until AfterStory. If you think I've been grasping at straws so far, trust me, we'll get some absolutely insane changes in AfterStory. But the fact KyoAni made these tiny tweaks here as well is what shows me it was an intentional effort to change the themes of the entire narrative, not just them censoring the more disagreeable moments from AfterStory when we get to them. But before we're able to dive into the magnum opus that is AfterStory, and given how long this video is, I legitimately have no clue how we're going to make it through that in one go, we have to address the more bite-sized adaptations that make up the second season's first few episodes. So join me next time as the anime's animation budget seemingly doubles, and we speedrun through some of the VN's most eclectic routes, including team sports, gang warfare, syscon, dating a cat, and Kimura will be there too, I guess.